Okay, hello, Brian. Hello, chat room, which may just be Alex. Hi, Alex, because a lot of people are watching basketball. That's cool. We're gonna record it, and then people can listen when they feel like it. But anyways, Brian.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Elon. Like this isn't even really supposed to be like a YouTube show.
Yeah.
It's just like while we record using YouTube. So here it is on YouTube. We're not gonna like take it off YouTube.
I mean, would we if we decided we didn't want to do a live show, we probably wouldn't record using YouTube, to be fair.
That's true.
But I
But
do.
we do a live show.
Well, yeah. Okay, so we're on the same page. We were already just chatting before this. It was getting a little contentious, so I thought that was
Your
a good time to
gain
start the
your
show.
gain just in case you're troubleshooting, your gain went up there.
Okay, I don't
I know
know.
you are so tired of hearing about it. I'm just so tired of hearing it happen.
I'm just a loud talker.
No, but you talked at a very steady, like this is what I'm saying. It's not just when you shout.
Okay, do you have a suggestion?
No, it's not. It's your mic.
I don't know.
Hmm?
I don't know. I don't know what to say. I could buy a new mic.
Me neither.
I could
I
take
just
off.
like I thought maybe like, if I give you enough information about when it happens and what it sounds like,
I've been
you might
having this thing
fix
on
it.
it. Should I
If it
like
was
take
me,
the
you'd be telling me to buy a new computer.
I mean, are you still using the same old computer?
Yeah, the one that you told me to replace 4 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, I wonder if it's even for other reasons.
If what's for other reasons.
Like maybe it would be nice to buy a new computer. Like I just wonder what it's like to have such an old computer.
It doesn't feel old.
Okay, that's good. That's
When
all
did
that
you buy
matters.
your computer?
Pretty long time ago, I guess.
And how does it feel?
I don't. The thing is, I don't use this computer for anything else but recording the show, actually. So
What?
yeah, I'm using a Mac Mini that I have in my bedroom that I used to use to also host my media, my like Plex server. Except now I've
Until
gone.
you were reborn.
Yeah, now I stream from Crave and from Netflix, and I pay full price. So I don't need. I only use this computer to record podcasts.
Well, what an ethical content consumer.
I mean, I feel like if our listeners are streaming us legally, hopefully, no, I didn't see any torrents of our almanac last year.
I'm sure it was shared illicitly once. Like someone bought it and it was like their brother was like, "Oh, hey, did you get it?" Or sister, and
Yeah,
I
I'm
was
sure.
like, "Yeah,
Yeah,
here it
I'm sure that
is."
happened. I mean,
Yeah.
even I
And they
actually,
put it in Dropbox.
to be honest, Brian, I actually shared it with a couple people. I assumed I'm allowed.
You owe me like
I owe you money.
$10. Put it in the expenses.
Yeah, well, a couple people just wanted to hear like a specific chapter. Like Dina's dad just wanted to hear the Ottawa chapter. My roommate just wanted, or my work roommate, I don't know, co-worker wanted to hear just the Toronto chapter. So I wasn't gonna
$20, man.
$20. So we should have sold chapters one by one, $2
We
a
talked
piece.
about that.
It's a lot of work. I don't know. Anyways, Alex has an idea for us. So how about before we start, Alex, give it to me.
I feel like it's gonna be that we just do this.
Just chat.
I
Yeah,
feel like there are funnier and more interesting people than us.
I doubt that's it. You leak your almanac with a decoy file loaded with ransomware. I like that.
Oh,
That's a good idea. Brian, you sold him
damn.
short. He wasn't gonna say make a podcast where you banter. There's like 20,000 of those.
Well, yeah. Well, that's what I was saying. It wasn't gonna work, but that's a really good idea.
Can you get arrested for that though, right?
How
Like
many leaked almanacs do you think people would actually go for? Like, who would know that we leaked the almanac unless we wrote them in emails saying, "Oops, our almanac leaked. Please don't download it at this link until we
Yeah,
say that it's officially released."
we just say it on the show. I feel like we're like, guys, we'd really appreciate if you buy the almanac. Also, if you happen to Google the almanac, you might see a leaked version. Do not download that, even though you could get it totally for free. All right, you made one of those podcasts. Alex, send me the link. I'll listen to your banter. One like for 10 minutes. I'll listen to 10 minutes of it. I've gotten in trouble like telling people I'll listen to their podcast, and then it's like 2 hours about a topic I'm not interested in. And then, you have to make that decision of, am I going to like A, listen through? Am I going to B, not listen and say I did? Or C, like, just be honest and tell them I was bored.
D, like, end your friendship
Yeah.
and cut off all communications.
Yeah. Yeah, a couple times it's been with like patrons.
Yeah, so bottom line, do not ask Elon to listen to your
Well,
podcast
unless it's good. I mean,
unless it's short and it interests him immediately.
well, I mean, definitely like shorter is easier to, or you could like point out what's a good part. One of them was like, I mean, a good friend of mine, like it didn't end the friendship, but she had makes a podcast about musical theater, and I was like, I'll check that out.
Is this EKL? Can I get
EKL? No, no, not EKL.
okay.
Come on.
I want to know if I know the friend.
It's
That's like the one.
Jay
It's
from New York.
I don't know Jay from New York.
You do. I talk about them all the time. I was like, oh, you like them better than me.
Oh, yeah, yeah. But I never met her.
Yeah, well, you should. She's great.
I mean, we were in the same house for several hours,
Oh, right. All right. This
but I
is
never met her. Great
you
haircut,
just want
by
to
the
not.
way.
You just want to kill time so that you
You're
don't have to talk
looking-
about all the players. I
You're
know
looking really fresh.
You like it? Oh, you
This is
finally looked at me.
This is one of your best haircuts.
I just got it today.
And matched with. Did you get them to shave to do the shave also?
No, I shaved myself.
Wow.
I'm a big boy. Okay.
Once I said yes, and then like I didn't realize it was extra.
Once I got a shave for my wedding day, and then it was like the day before, and they cut me, and so then
I remember that.
then Dina wasn't happy.
For my brother's wedding, we went to a barber who like did a straight shave in the morning, but he also like shaved off, like he trimmed our eyebrows.
What the?
Like didn't shape them, like sort of like ran a comb through them and like took off like shortened them.
I've
like
seen
so
like
if,
I've
let's say
seen
we have
old people that
1
need
inch
that.
eyebrows, like they were half an inch. Yeah, we didn't. So like both me and my brother in his wedding photos like don't look like we've ever looked in our entire lives. We have like these faded, lighter colored eyebrows.
So stupid.
He was really mad about it.
Well,
I
whatever.
see that barber every day. He's right around the corner from me now.
It's funny, like, you take your wedding. Everyone takes their wedding like so seriously, and then it's over, and then it's like, now what? Like,
And some barber fucks it all up.
but also, it's like, who cares in the end? Like, how often is your brother looking at this photo? I guess some people like look at their photos a lot.
Yeah,
Do you think-
want it? JG Pajot. I came across his Instagram today for reasons I can't even remember.
Okay.
And like every other photo is like some reference to his wedding.
Well,
It's
did
like
you just
happy
get
1
married?
year, or like happy 1 year anniversary, and it was like 2018 was a great year, and like now I'm with my wife at the car dealership. Like I don't know, it was
Okay.
it seemed a little intense.
The third one doesn't sound like a wedding related thing. It sounds like they just went to the car dealership.
It was just, yeah, I don't know. I guess so.
All right, we should start. We have a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
We also have a patron cast coming up. We should have saved all this for that.
Oh yeah, that would have been really good.
I'll just
We
like
can
copy this
repeat
over.
it. We can just start the patron cast with this clip
Yeah, that's what
and
I'm
then
thinking.
show up wearing the same clothes like 15 minutes in.
I don't
just
think we
pick
even
up.
need to do the second part. Let's start. Okay. Yeah, Raptors. I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, let me start. That doesn't. I was trying to think of something to say like while I was going. Yes, go Raptors.
Kawhi, yes.
Okay, fine.
I mean, don't do it on my
Okay, well, what else you got?
I don't know. Play Glory, yes.
Kawhi, yeah.
Yeah, do Kawhi. You're in Toronto. Toronto's your hometown.
Yeah.
I told my brother about that today. He just rolls his eyes.
What, that I think Toronto's my hometown? You guys are just too protective of Ottawa. Like, get over it. I don't like it like you
It had
do.
nothing to do with Ottawa.
It is. They're like,
I think you have this vendetta. You have like a vendetta against Ottawa. What did Ottawa ever do to you?
I don't have a vendetta. It's not my
It
home.
was like everything I ever say like about Toronto. It's just like you like slap back with Ottawa. Like I don't
Well,
know what you
Why
think I
does that
think of
have to-
Ottawa.
Why does your brother roll his eyes when I say that Toronto's my hometown? It's the town where my home is.
So what's a town home?
That is a house that's kind of small, right? Or it's a townhouse.
Yeah, it's a townhouse. Is that a house in town? By definition, everybody's in a townhouse.
Wow. Okay. I'm gonna start. So Kawhi, yes. I guess that works. Kawhi, yes! Welcome everybody to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the best fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by two guys on air across in their keeper pools. It is definitely going to be one of our least oh no. What's the word? Not populated. Attended.
Did you start
least
timer?
Yes. Least attended live episodes we do because the Raptors are playing a big game today in Toronto. But Brian, I've still got hockey on my mind. Let's get into it. Oh yeah, I didn't even introduce you. I'm so excited, Brian. I'm Elon Dabrowski. I think I said that. This is Brian Com. We're ready to talk hockey.
Hi everybody. We are so ready to talk hockey after 15 minutes. Like if you've never tuned in live or checked out our YouTube channel, you shouldn't. Like there's no need, but if you ever want to know what Elon and I talk about when we're not talking about hockey, there's a solid 12 minutes of nothing that you can listen in on. It's like a patron cast preview. We're going to do a patron cast next week on June 9th. So if you want to get a taste, listen there. But also we have you keep interrupting me. You're just so eager to talk hockey. Let's get to I want to talk hockey too.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to say Brian, I think, was procrastinating. That's why we started a little bit late, because we have so many great players to talk about. And I feel like Brian, just wanted to get that last little bit of, I don't know what I'm doing. Should I start the whole thing over? This is crazy. We're so late. Don't say the patron cast date, because I still need to confirm. Kawhi! Yes! Welcome everybody to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the best fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by two guys on Eric Karlsson in their keeper pools. I am your host, Elon Dabrowski, and even though I'm in Toronto, I am not watching the Raptors game. I'm here with my very best friend to talk about the new members of the 75 plus point club, Brian Com.
Hello, Elon. Hello, everybody. Yes, Sunday night, Raptors game, Game of Thrones, but none of that happens. A live episode of Keeping Karlsson happens. And for anyone who's not joined us live, you can watch us on our YouTube channel. And if you're listening to this now, you can even go back and get a taste of next week's patron cast, because we just talked for 12 minutes about just about nothing, but we have so much something to get to starting right now.
Okay, yeah, if you want to go hear a bunch of random banter, go to keepingkarlsson.com/YouTube. But yes, Brian, like I said, this is a new tradition for Keeping Karlsson. I think we started this last year or the year before. We did our 70-point club episode where we talk about who are the players who had never gotten 70 points before, and now for the first time, they did it this past season. And then we talked about, would they do it again? Like, was this sustainable? What does this mean for the future? Unfortunately, this year, like a whole ton of people got 70 points is nothing now. Everyone gets 70 points because there's so much scoring in the NHL. So this week, we're going to talk about the new members of the 75-point club to have a more reasonable list of players to go through. Before we get into that, of course, let's mention that we are presented by DobberHockey.com, the top fantasy hockey website out there. They just dropped their draft guide. It is there. It's full of rankings and charts and write-ups and all that good stuff. Cam Robinson is all over that thing. So if you like Cam and if you like prospects and if you like hockey, check out DobberHockey.com and go get that draft guide. But okay, Brian, let's get going. Setting the table, like I said, we usually talked about the 70-point club. We're switching it to the 75-point club because there were 55 players who hit 70 points or more last season compared to only 36 the season before. So like I said, 70 points, that's nothing. Everyone does it now. So we decided to go higher. There are 37 players to hit 75 points this year. So clearly 75 is the new 70. And I'm curious, Brian, have you adjusted the way you think of 70 points in your head? Like, I feel like for me, the number of points that a player paces for really tells me a lot about the player. Like, oh, that's a 60-point guy. Oh, that's a 70-point guy. That's an 80-point guy. Like, to me, that really means something in my head. I feel like we just have to do this mapping now. I'm curious if you've already done it, that what I used to think of as a 70-point guy, I need to start thinking about as a 75-point guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so the question is scoring going up in the NHL, right? Are we just going to have more scoring and more points, that the 75 is the new 70 just by virtue of more points being available? So I did some digging in preparation for the show to see, why do we have all these guys suddenly crossing this threshold that was a lot harder to cross not so long ago. And the reason I found, so I'm just like, if you look at all the goals scored, there were about 130 more goals scored in 2018-19 compared to the season prior. But there were almost 200 more assists doled out as well. 300 more total points on the whole. Some of that, like the goals are coming from a higher shooting percentage from the skaters. I know a big theory is power play opportunities. That's not it. There were almost 7,750 power play opportunities in 17-18. There were about 140 fewer of those in 2018-19. So it's a combination of better scoring, better shooting, or worse goaltending, something in that sphere. Plus, it seems as though on each goal, maybe there's an extra assist getter sometimes than there has been in the past. I don't know. I'm very curious to see if this trend continues. It doesn't really matter for fantasy, I guess, but like it is interesting because when we want to talk about if a player's a 65, 70, 75, 80 point guy, we need to keep that scale in mind to make sure we're classifying him in the right echelon to make sure we're denoting that player's accomplishment as being rare enough. Right? I don't want to say some guy's 70-point player if 75 players are getting 70 points.
Well, yeah, or maybe you do. Depends on the player. Depends what point you're trying to make. I think the higher shooting percentage theory, the thing about more assists happening, to me, that seems random. I'd be very curious to hear if people have an explanation for why there are more assists on average per goal happening. The shooting percentage thing makes sense to me because wasn't there a whole thing where they changed the goalie equipment and some goalies were complaining with the new rules? So maybe it is like worse goaltending, but not necessarily because the goalies are worse, but just because their equipment is a little different. That would make sense to me. I recall that being a discussion point last summer. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, the goalie equipment thing. That's always been a topic, but they actually did act on it. So maybe that's a thing. I also, by the way, just calculated quickly assists per goal. It was almost exactly equal between the last two seasons. So yeah, let's not bark up that tree. It was more goals scored, and Elon, good theory, because if there were fewer power play opportunities, we either have to assume that or sticks were suddenly constructed better, or there's another reason shooters are finding the net more often. Maybe it's just variance too.
Yeah. Wait. So this whole thing you said before about more assists, that was wrong. That was a red herring.
Well, there were more assists, but if you take into account the more goals that were scored, come on, proportionally, it all evens out. I should have done that math before.
Okay, so should we start the show over? That was a ridiculous thing that you said. Whoa, there were more assists. Where did they come from? Okay.
Well, I mean, it just dawned on me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm glad we at least said that and didn't get angry emails if there's anyone that's going to listen to this episode at the start of June. Do you know there's still hockey going on? By the way, there was a huge break where there was a week, it felt like, of no games, but the Bruins and the St. Louis Blues have been playing in the Stanley Cup Finals. They actually had a game yesterday, and even crazier, Jake Allen played. How about that? Jordan Binnington got pulled. It ended up being a 7-2 win for the Bruins. They have 2-1. This isn't really a news show. Just throwing it out there. But Brian, remember we had that conversation? I think it was last week or last episode or the episode before about Jordan Binnington. Someone was asking how elite of a fantasy goalie is this guy, especially in a keeper league. And I remember saying, you go check the tape. My only concern is that he was a nobody just a year ago. So it's hard to really depend on, okay, he's the for sure future of the Blues. And you saw yesterday, now I'll bet you there's people wondering, oh, who should get the next start? Is it Binnington or Allen? I'm sure Binnington will get the. Okay, fine. So Binnington will get the next start, but if he struggles again, I can see the next game maybe it going to Allen. I don't know. I'm just saying that it still just doesn't seem like he's had an amazing season. I'm probably going to sound dumb for saying this after he gets a shutout in the next 3 games, but I feel like next season, watch, if it's Binnington and Allen, once again, Binnington will start the season as a starter, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's a stretch at some point where Binnington struggles for a bit and Allen gets a stretch of games. Binnington's a new goalie in the league, so sometimes I just feel like goalies like that go on cold stretches, and then you start to question whether or not they're going to hold the spot, especially someone who didn't really have the pedigree like Jordan Binnington. And again, it was only one game. I don't mean to read too much into one bad game.
Yeah. And Jake Allen has had these little opportunities to prove himself before, right? We're going on roughly 3 years where he cannot string enough games together to make a convincing case that he's a number 1 or even 1A goalie in the league. He was, once upon a time, in his second full-time season, a .920 goalie. That's when St. Louis had him and Brian Elliott, and neither guy has really proven themselves to be so effective outside of the particular context of those St. Louis teams. So I know you don't want to get too deep into it. You're not saying a whole lot, but let's not, I don't even Okay, maybe we should go down that path because I said the same thing about Curtis McElhaney, and then look at what he did. We
Well, no,
can't.
what I was gonna say, Brian, is like what you're saying right now is the exact same thing you could say about Martin Jones, right? Like he hasn't shown himself to be that great as a number one goalie, but Aaron Dell just really struggled, so Martin Jones kept on getting the starts. That's the kind of situation I could see happening in St. Louis next year. I'm not saying that Jake Allen's gonna become this amazing goalie out of nowhere, but I'm saying he could be as good as Martin Jones was, and potentially Jordan Binnington could end up being as good as Aaron Dell. Aaron Dell had an amazing stretch. He was playing Binnington-esque a couple seasons ago, and he was looking like, oh, maybe he should become the starter for San Jose. And look at him now. Like even with Jones struggling, Dell couldn't get into a playoff game. But anyways, I don't want to get into it. I just want to throw it out there, have a little bit of current hockey talk before we get into talking about the season. We're not really going to be talking much more playoffs aside from what I just brought up. Is there anything else you want to say about the Bruins and the Blues before we move forward?
No.
Okay.
With apologies to Bruins and Blues fans, you have the only teams that anyone is really talking about on a day-to-day basis. So you have your content. You don't need it from us.
Yeah, well, maybe there'll be some Bruins or Blues players who are new entrants to the 75-point club, so we'll definitely be talking about them then. So let's get into it. So, Brian, first of all, let's set the table again. I think I already said set the table. I need a new saying. But there's 14 players that we're going to be inducting into this club. So 14 players who had never hit 75 points before, and now they have in this past season. And like I said, we're going to just talk about each one of them and discuss if we think they'll be able to do it again, like how did it happen, what changed, all that good stuff. Brian, one fun thing is all these players, all 14 of them, not only had they never hit 75 points before, none of them have even hit 70 before. So this could have just been the 70-point episode and we just cut it short. So that's, I think, a fun fact. There's no player that I brought up that ever even had more than 70, and they all hit 75. So what a great year for all these players. Also, Brian, here a quick guess before we get started with the show proper. I just want to keep saying table setting. A lot of intro here, Brian. I just want to really tease people. Want to try to guess, of these 14 players who hit 75 points for the first time, how many of them do you think we projected in our almanac last summer to get 75 or more points?
Oh, man.
Out of 14.
Well, I think in our projections, we were generally lower, like in trying to figure out how many points would generally be scored. So keeping that in mind, I'm going to go with 7.
Oh my God. I wish, Brian. The answer is
6.
3.
Oh no.
3 of these 14 players.
You can pre-order your almanac now at keepingkarlsson.com/almanac.
Yeah, so we've been doing over the last few episodes, right, a little almanac epilogue discussing what we got wrong and what we're learning from it. So this is still technically part of that, right? Like we're going to be trying to figure out what we got wrong with these projections. I'll let you know for each player as they come up what we projected. Brian, there are 6 of these 14 players we projected to get 70 or more. So that's pretty good. And then there's 8 of them where we were like under 70 and then they hit 75 plus. But also there's a whole
pretty good considering that a lot of them hadn't hit 70 before. So I'll take that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hard thing about projecting fantasy. You have to figure out which players are going to do something that they had never done before. And we'll discuss why they did it. So let's get started. Okay, what I'm thinking I'll do is, Brian, I'm just going to read you down the list of NHL scoring leaders, and we'll take a stop at each player who got to 75 plus for the first time. So we get number 1, Kucherov, McDavid, Patrick Kane, Draisaitl, Sidney Crosby, Brad Marchand, Johnny Gaudreau, Nathan McKinnon, Steven Stamkos, Alex Barkov. All those guys had hit 75 or more before. And then we get to the top scorer who had never even had 75 points before. Welcome to the 75-point club, Mitch Marner. What a season for Mitch Marner. 94 points in 82 games compared to 69 points in 82 games 2 seasons ago in 2017-18. So a huge jump. He barely missed out on the 70-point club 2 seasons ago. Last season, he gets there, and then he does like a victory lap, ends up with 94. The crazy thing is, I took a look. He had fewer power play points last season than the season before. So he did this all, I guess, at even strength for the most part. How much credit, Brian, are you going to give to it just being that Marner got to play with Tavares this year versus Marner just like maturing into this amazing player at the age of 21? He's currently an RFA. Matthews makes 11.5 million. Tavares makes 11 million. I'm curious, like, how much is Marner worth? Like, this guy's a superstar.
So for all UFA, RFA, all free agent talk, let's shout out right off the top the contract projections that are being released over at Evolving Wild right now, and I'll mention them in our show notes if you haven't seen them yet. They are very informative. Last season, I don't know if anyone remembers, we had Matt Kane, who is now a member of the New Jersey Devils analytics department. He had developed a model for predicting contracts, and he released all of his projections, and the accuracy was pretty impressive. So this offseason, Evolving Wild has stepped up and released their model. Again, we'll post it in our show notes, and their model projects Marner's next contract at $9.8 million for 10 years, which, actually seems pretty fair. So, and trying to situate him amongst the other free agents, Marner would be with that salary and contract ahead of Skinner, Point, and Matthew Tkachuk, and behind Sebastian Aho, Mikko Rantanen, and Artemi Panarin. So that seems about the right place to slot him. Good luck to Toronto fitting Marner under their cap without getting themselves in real trouble. We all know and have seen this coming. They're going to have a fairly creative offseason to make this all work and keep the band together as
Brian,
best they can.
I almost feel like if they're projecting that Marner's going to only make $9 million, then I guess they're clearly on the side of the Leafs somehow being able to convince Marner that the only reason he got all those points was because he was playing with Tavares, right? Because Tavares is making 11 and Marner had like just as many more points than him. So are you taking that stance? Like, what's the reason for Marner's big jump? Because the one big change I see, aside from him being a year older, is that he played all season with John Tavares.
Yeah, so I think, for the record, Marner is worth it at $9.8 million because he is deserving of a big share of the credit. Yes, of course we give credit to John Tavares, but first I want to look at what Marner did differently himself this season, which actually isn't a whole lot. Like, he did not evolve into a brand new player this season. What he did is he was deployed for a few more minutes of ice time per night. And with that, he shot and scored at more or less the same rate at 5-on-5 as he did in 17-18. But the extra raw time on ice got him another 4 goals and about 40 more shots. And as you mentioned, Elon, we also saw actually a decrease in power play production from Mitch Marner. He had 5 fewer power play goals, and that accounts for essentially the whole drop between this season and the one before it. And, in 17-18, I'm not sure he deserved those 5 power play goals. So this is regression that could have been expected and seems reasonable. Like, Marner's shooting percentage was cut by more than half on the power play, down from 16% in 17-18 to 7% in 18-19. But more constant and reliable measures like expected goals and shot rates also dropped for Marner. So I think that's why I think it's fair to say that him losing 5 power play goals year over year was a fairly deserved drop for Mitch Marner. But again, he was a beast at 5-on-5 and still had very good power play numbers. And then you look at his line mates, and this is where Tavares starts to come in. In 2017-18, Elon, think to yourself, I don't know if any of our listeners want to play along too, who did Mitch Marner play with the most before Tavares came along?
I remember there was a Kadri, Marner, Marlowe, was it line that was hot at one point?
Yeah, so Kadri, Marlowe, Marner was a line. So was Bozak, Marlowe, Marner. So Marlowe, Bozak, Kadri's 3 most common line mates 2 seasons ago. James Van Riemsdyk was his 4th most common line mate. That worked well. Zach Hyman, his 5th most common. So these, no real game breakers here. James Van Riemsdyk comes pretty close, but he was the 4th most regular line mate of Marner.
No shade on Kadri. He's pretty good.
No, Kadri's great. Yeah, no, but if Marlowe and Bozak are your 2 most common line mates, that's not ideal. It's certainly not what Marner got in 18-19, which was John Tavares, and having Tavares on his line gave Marner someone to feed and cash in with for assists. Marner's primary assist rates tripled in 2018-19. So a finisher like Tavares helps, but of course, Marner gets credit for setting him up and creating offense, and I'm not sure why that tandem might change next year, so long as Marner is still a Toronto Maple Leaf. And that's why I think Marner is a legit 100-point candidate for next season. And I don't think, like, the question is, okay, but what if he isn't a Toronto Maple Leaf? For now, we're going to assume he is. But even if he isn't, I don't think that 100-point projection drops off a whole lot, because he's going to be an excellent top-line player somewhere. And I think he's probably good for 90 points wherever he lands, so long as it's not like Ottawa, where he's in a total offensive wasteland.
Yeah, I feel like okay. So first of all, you're saying you think that Marner's going to stick in the 75 plus point club. That sounds
And
pretty.
then some.
And then some. If you're saying all the way up to 100, you're saying he's going to improve on the 94 points. So Brian is super high on Mitch Marner. Is he the first? Maybe I'm getting too far off the beaten path here. Like, would he rank potentially as the first Leaf you drafted? Or is he the third after Matthews and Tavares? And I think about Marner is he has winger eligibility, which is always valuable in fantasy.
Yeah, I think I'd probably still go Matthews first, but then it would be really close between Tavares and Marner.
Man, but like, how many points do you think Matthews is going to get? If you've got Marner at 100, what is Matthews getting? Like 120 to make it worthwhile to have that center only versus winger? I don't know. Okay, we'll discuss it more in
I
the
think I'm
almanac.
looking at Matthews more for the goal scoring, right? Assuming that goals are weighted positively in your league. If you're in a points league and goals are worth more than assists, you can count on Matthews for getting close to 40 goals. So yeah, I think that's the reason why I would do it. If it's points only, then it's probably more even.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Alex in the chat pointing out Leafs are gonna. I've been seeing news about this. Roto World like has a lot of news about the Leafs, but they have news about everyone, of course. But Zaitsev and Marlowe, the Leafs are trying to unload both of their contracts. That might help them have money to sign Mitch Marner. Man, that Zaitsev contract at the time it looked like they needed defenseman. That's a pretty good contract. Now I'm sure they're very happy to get out of his contract if they can.
Yeah, and the Marlowe contract looked awful the day it happened, so that's a big pain. Lucky for them, it only lasts one more year, but it's like 1 year more too many considering the situation they're in. And also, fun fact: do you know the Leafs are still paying Phil Kessel $1.2 million for 3 more seasons?
Oh wow, that's wild that they had to take on contract to ship Kessel. Like he helped the Penguins a lot. Like the Penguins should pay for him. They won 2 cups. Like I feel like he was worth it, but I guess that was a really good job by the Penguins GM. Okay, so let's move on. We're continuing down the list of scoring leaders, trying to find who else is a new member of the 75 plus point club after Mitch Marner. It's actually Jonathan Huberdeau, who's the next member, 92 points, 2 points less than Marner, but still such an amazing season after he also only had 69 points in 2017-18. So Marner and Huberdeau, like 2 peas in a pod. We just talked about Huberdeau a lot in the last episode. We were talking about players who we projected wrong compared to other almanac projector or players we projected wrong in our world's first ever NHL audio fantasy almanac. Okay, sorry, I have it. We just talked about Huberdeau last episode. We were in a discussion about players that we projected incorrectly in our world's first ever NHL audio almanac last summer. So yeah, I don't know if we really have to get into him too much again. Like I believe if I recall what you said, you didn't think he was going to hit 92 again, but you did think he was going to be at least like, I think you said like 80, 85. So you think he's going to stay in the 75 plus point club, right?
I did, but I didn't say he was going to be quite as successful in 1920 as he was in 1819. Like you said, Elon, anyone listening, wondering what we really think about Huberdeau, all in the last episode. But the Cole's notes are that Huberdeau's a great player, but getting to play with Barkov when Trocheck got injured is what turned Huberdeau from a 70-ish point guy, someone who might not have otherwise crossed the 75-point threshold, into a 90-plus point player. So we're going to wait to see how Joel Quenneville deploys him this upcoming season. If he stays on the second line, I don't know that he re-enters the 75-point club. I think he sits around the 70-point mark, but on Barkov's wing, he can get above 80. And of course, both of those assume that he holds his role on the top power play, which seems likely.
Yeah, I mean, there is one awesome player too many on that Florida team. So someone does get bumped from the top power play. Last year it was Trocheck a bit at the end, but it seemed to be rotating in and out like Hoffman, Trocheck. But I think Huberdeau was generally always on the top power play, even though he was someone we were worried about early in the season when he wasn't there. But I don't want to get into that now. That's going to be all next season of keeping Karlsson, I'm sure, talking about what's going on with the Florida top 6 and top power play. By the way, Brian, I forgot to ask you, do you want to try to guess? Mitch Marner, like I said, ended the season with 94 points. What do you think we projected him for? Or do you want me to just tell you?
I think we would have said somewhere between 75 and 80.
Yeah, so we both said 75. So he's one of our, I'll count, it's not a hit because we were like 20 points off, but it is a hit. He is a player who made it to the 75-point club, and we said he would. So we'll take what we can get. Guys, our almanac that we do this summer with all these great lessons we've learned is going to be so, so good. We're going to get everything right. So you could actually pre-order that right now, keepingkarlsson.com/almanac. We really did get Huberdeau very, very wrong. We discussed this last episode. I got it more wrong than you. I had him at like 60 points. You had him around 65. So yeah, he ended up with 92. So that was a miss for sure, as most of these people will be, because they're new members of the 75-point club, which Brian is saying those are the hardest guys to, on like looking back, to have predicted correctly, because they're guys who had never done it before. And like I'm saying, these guys never even hit 70 before. Now they got 75 plus. Okay, so let's continue down the list. And actually, the next player in NHL scoring is also a new member, and that's Braden Point, who, just like Huberdeau, ended the season with 92 points, a huge improvement over his 66 points in 2017-18. Is the main reason why Braden Point got so many points, was it because of this 21.5 shooting percentage? That's the one thing I'm looking at that might be a reason to think Braden Point can't do it again, because that is obviously a super high shooting percentage. He only took 191 shots last season, and he scored 41 goals on them, versus he had more shots the previous season, 217 shots, but he only had 32 goals. So I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of, because I think Braden Point is amazing. I had him on my... Sorry. I think Braden Point is amazing. I had him on my championship-winning Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League team, but I'm trying to think of, is there any reason for us not to just think of him as a 90-plus point guy again for next season?
Taking less than 200 shots is usually not a recipe for a whole lot of shooting success. Braden Point found it, though, with 41 goals on those shots. You've got guys like Pavelski and Scheifele also shot 20% with under 200 shots. But outside of that, there's about 6 guys who managed to take fewer than 200 shots and get 30 goals or more. Braden Point, of course, up at 41 in sort of another stratosphere by scoring on 1 out of every 5 shots that he took. So can he do that again? So can he do that again? Well, I divided his shot taking into 5-on-5 situations and power play situations, and I was kind of surprised to see Braden Point's 5-on-5 scoring was actually very consistent compared to last year. On the whole, by the way, I just want to put this out there right away. Some people, when they look at Braden Point trying to figure out what should I do with him, oh no, his minutes went down in 18-19. That's because he was taken off the penalty kill unit, which is why he had 14 fewer blocks this season than the one before it, or at least played a role. So keep that in mind when you're looking at him next year. Anyway, let's go back to your shooting percentage question. And like I said, Elon, Braden Point had a near identical 5-on-5 shooting percentage this season as he did the one before it. Point also had similar goal totals, shot rates, expected goals, all of the things we would normally look at to see, well, can this guy do it again? Is he scoring at the right rate? And on top of his 19 very sustainable 5-on-5 goals, Braden Point added 10 primary assists to his totals this season, because that's what happens when you get ample time to set up Kucherov instead of being mostly on the ice with Andre Palat and Yanni Gourde. So that's how Point was able to still, even beyond those 41 goals, pad his point totals a little more. On the power play is where his shooting percentage really ballooned, though. Braden Point took 51 shots on the power play. And Elon, do you know how many of them he scored on?
Well, you said like 18 goals at even strength, so I'm guessing the answer is going to be like 20 on the power play?
Yeah, very observant of you. 20 power play goals on 51 shots. That's almost a 40% conversion rate, which is good enough to be the highest converting shooter in the league on the power play. Only Alex Barkov and Mikko Rantanen were even in the vicinity of Braden Point shooting percentage amongst players who taken a roughly proportionate amount of shots. So that's not a skill, right? That's not a repeatable skill. That's not going to last. So I think the question is, if we regress those power play shooting totals, will Braden Point improve enough on his own accord to wash out that variance and still put up 92 points again in 2019-20? Remember that Braden Point, young guy, 22 years old in 18-19. So now he's heading into his age 23 season. So I think that there is a decent chance that he can take enough of a step forward in his game, wash out the extra power play goals that he's likely to lose because of regression, and still come up with about 90 points next season. He's another guy whose future is kind of in doubt, right? He's a restricted free agent on a sort of cap space strat team. Evolving Wild has projected Braden Point's next contract to be 5 years at about $8.2 million a year, which is like exactly the amount of cap space Tampa has So we'll see how things move around him in Tampa or elsewhere and adjust our projections accordingly once they do. But like Marner, Point is a legit top line talent wherever he goes. So I'm really not overly concerned if you're in a keeper league trying to make moves over the summer. Don't worry that Braden Point is somehow going to end up somewhere else and not going to be able to do as much. He's a very skilled hockey player. I think he can get to 85, 90 points next year. The difference between him and Marner, though, is that I don't think he's a lock or he's as likely to become a 100-point player just because he's another year older. Points challenge next year is really just going to be to hit 92 again in a sustainable way, and then build on that in the seasons that follow while he's still in his prime.
Wow. Okay. So still, you think he's definitely going to stay in the 75-point club. You're saying he could even do 92 points again. He's playing with Kucherov also. So it's like he's such a skilled player. Plus he's playing with the guy who won the Art Ross trophy, gets so many points all the times, continued into the playoffs. So like, it's like one of the best spots you can be in. So if Braden Point stays playing with Kucherov, it's going to be hard for him not to get like 85, 90, maybe more points. Also, remember when we were learning about why we got the Marchand projection wrong, and we were talking about how like his Marchand's shots were down like the previous year, so we thought maybe that was going to be his new shot totals. Like Braden Point did have 217 shots a couple seasons ago, then fell to 191 shots last year. Maybe he'll get more shots next year, right? Like maybe that will also help. Like maybe not only like, you know, he'll take more shots on the power play to maybe earn those goals. So I think it's possible that he'll just take more shots to help stave off that regression. So lots of ways, lots of outs for Braden Point to continue doing what he did. We projected him for 70 points in our almanac, which isn't terrible. So we did expect that he was going to improve, but we didn't think he was going to improve this much, clearly.
No, we didn't. Like we saw a big season from him, and we also saw, again, better line mates. Like anybody going from Palat and Gourde to Kucherov as your primary partner is going to get like just an automatic 10 or 15 point boost. Braden Point got that, and then that shooting percentage helps. So I'm hoping next
Brian, you're having
still
internet
often
glitches.
paired with Kucherov. That would be really nice for him.
Sorry, Brian, you had internet glitches. Can you do that whole thing again?
Oh no.
Yeah, it was all glitchy.
How did it start?
I don't know. You were saying like, oh, like when he was playing with Palat and this person, and then.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Now I can.
Okay. You're
really
frozen.
Oh no. Alex, are you still there? Am I frozen for you, or is Brian the one glitching out?
Oh, now you're unfrozen.
Oh, he wasn't watching.
We're good.
You were, yeah. I'm guessing it's you.
Okay.
Yeah, if you could let us know. But either way, Brian's gonna repeat it.
Oh, don't go back, Alex. That's okay. Do you remember what you said last?
Oh, it was Brian's audio. I said that maybe he can get more shots to save off the regression.
Yeah, so more shots would definitely be one way he can do it. Another way he can do it is just keep playing with Kucherov, right? Instead of Palat and Gourde or anyone else. That's obviously the optimal place for him to be in the lineup. So that's one of the big things I'm looking to see where he shows up in the Tampa lineup, especially knowing that some pieces might be moving and shifting to accommodate his next contract. So ideally he plays with Kucherov again. And that's the big thing for anybody. That's an automatic 10 or 15 point bump, right? Compared to Palat and Gourde. Not to like really assail Palat and Gourde too much. They're fine hockey players, but it's nice to play with Kucherov, but Braden Point was also not riding Kucherov's coattails. I don't want to paint that picture too. He got what Kucherov has to offer and then put in more himself.
Yeah, definitely. And also, I should point out, I think that we were really smart in the almanac for Braden Point because we projected 70 points for him, assuming that he wasn't going to be playing on a line with Kucherov. Like, I recall going into the season, we were thinking about like Stamkos, Kucherov, JT Miller as the top line, and we were still projecting Braden Point to get 70 points on a second line with like Palat and Tyler Johnson or Yanni Gourde or whoever. So good for us. I'm going to give us a point there. Okay. Let's do one more player, and then we got a really special, fun advertisement to share. So we're going down the list of leading scorers. We just did Braden Point. Next was Blake Wheeler. He had done it before. Ovechkin, Tavares, Panarin, Rantanen, Giroux, all guys who've done it before. Scheifele, Then we get to, with 83 points in 82 games, Sebastian Aho. Wow, what a season for him. He also had 12 points in 15 playoff games, which was only a 66-point pace. So actually, Aho, maybe we should be worried about him. But I kid. Okay, so this followed up a 65-point sophomore season, which followed up a 49-point rookie season. So Aho, his graph of points is shooting in a very consistent direction. 49, 65, 83. Brian, for sure, I feel like he's got to be a lock to hit at least 75 again next year, right? The way his projection is going is up, and he's so young. My real question is more along the lines of whether you think 83 is where he'll peak, or are we expecting him to keep climbing into 95, 100 plus points? How high do you think Sebastian Aho is going to go? I think one thing in his favor, one good thing is he's going to be playing with probably Svechnikov a bit next year, if not at even strength. At least I would imagine on the power play, Svechnikov will be better, likely take over the even strength and power play roles that guys like Furland and Justin Williams were holding down. So I feel like Aho could end up with potentially better line mates, better goal scorers, specifically Svechnikov. And yeah, I don't know. I'm just really excited about him for next season.
Well, so that already did happen to some extent when Nino Niederreiter joined the Hurricanes with about 30 games left in the season. We'll get to that impact in a little bit. But Elon, do you know that Aho had 24 power play points, right? And I know what you're saying, the personnel could improve, but are you saying he could be one of those 30 to 35 power play point guys to really take him to the next level?
I don't know. I'm just saying that he had an amazing season. He's 21 years old, and I feel like the players around him are only getting better. So that's just my reason for thinking he could probably be better than even an 83-point guy. You could fill in the blanks about the power play. That's your job, Brian. You're the nerd here who's going to look into that stuff.
Well, it definitely can't hurt if his line mates improve on the power play. They already did at even strength, and they could still improve depending on how Svechnikov stacks up to whatever the third option would be for Aho and Niederreiter. But Aho did manage 21 power play assists last season. So that's a lot. There were goals being scored on the power play while he was on the ice, and he was a big factor in helping create them. And I think the bright side of seeing him succeed with sometimes suboptimal line mates is that this is all proof that Aho is going to do big things regardless of who he plays with and regardless of what variance does for him. Looking at Aho's numbers from this past season, honestly, it's kind of amazing that he got to 83 points. Usually guys who have 83 points in a season have one really high number somewhere amongst their 5-on-5 or power play percentages. Maybe it's their shooting percentages. Maybe somewhere amongst their 5-on-5 or power play percentages. Maybe it's their shooting percentage. Maybe it's their IPP. Maybe it's their on-ice shooting percentage. And some players have these numbers really high in a sustainable way. Some of them in an unsustainable way. But Aho, neither way. He had no very high numbers amongst the percentages we usually see that would usually have one high number to help a player get so many points. Elon, remember how Braden Point took 51 power play shots and scored on 20 of them?
Mm-hmm.
So Sebastian Aho, he took 50 power play shots. How many do you think he scored on?
I guess a lot fewer, 2.
Close. 3. He scored on 3 of his 50 power play shots, even though he took the same amount, essentially, as Braden Point, 17 fewer goals than Braden Point on the power play. Aho shot 6% on the power play, and honestly, his expected goals threat level was really not that far off of Braden Point's to justify that huge chasm between their shooting success. And then you look at Aho at 5-on-5, he shot only 9%, which, is okay, but I think he's probably a better player than that. He seems to have a better shot than that. And his teammates shot worse than that. So it's how did Aho even get to 83 points when nothing was, everything was average NHLer or worse from a shooting perspective? Well, first, he did take plenty of shots. He had 243 shots on goal. So even, that helps any player who's not scoring on a large proportion of their goals. But Sebastian Aho also scored 4 times on 12 short-handed shots. So he had a 33% shooting percentage while short-handed playing on the penalty kill. He also scored 5 times on empty nets. By the way, 100% shooting percentage on empty nets, not like those chumps we mentioned on our last episode. And honestly, the shorthanded and empty net scoring situations are what helped both Aho's rote goal totals and his shooting percentages get up to where they ended. Like, you look at Aho's shooting percentage, you're like, oh yeah, 12%. That's about where he should be. It's like, no, he had to have these 9 goals on 17 shots in weird situations to get there. Had he not converted in those 2 situations, we'd be having a very different talk about Sebastian Aho right now. I'd be pointing out his difficulties at converting at 5-on-5 and on the power play, wondering aloud whether his line mates are partially to blame, and saying that Aho probably deserved a good deal more than the 17 goals he scored. But thankfully, he got that extra help to get up to 30. And like I said, Elon, also towards the end of the year, Niederreiter really helped Aho get all the way up to a point per game. Aho only played 30 games with Nino on his line, but Niederreiter was the teammate on whose goals Aho picked up the most 5-on-5 assists. He assisted on 7 Niederreiter goals compared to just 4 assists on each of Teravainen's and Michael Furlan's goals. And he was playing with those guys for large parts of an entire season. So where does this leave us for next season for Sebastian Aho? Well, I'm certainly bought into Aho as a 30-goal scorer. It would be great if he did it in common situations rather than on the PK and with an empty net in front of him. I think he's capable of that. And then I have the question of, well, is he a Brad Marchand type? Like Brad Marchand, we talked about how he's like the sustainably good short-handed scorer. And this is the first season that we saw Sebastian Aho taking on any kind of short-handed role. So I'm curious to find out if Aho can repeat these 4 short-handed goals or anything like it next season. In any case, no matter how he puts it together on 5-on-5 or on the power play or short-handed or on empty net, I fully expect Aho to score 30 goals, be a point per game player again next season. And I see potential for 92 with and that's 90, TOO. I'm not getting that specific, but I see that potential with Niederreiter by Aho's side full time, and hopefully, yeah, his even strength line mate, his third piece is also really strong in that power play. Maybe he does become a 30 power play point guy. It seems like there's still more upside to be found for Sebastian Aho than the 83 points he got this year.
Wow. Okay. Thank you for the in-depth look. So it sounds like he had bad luck in some places and then really good luck potentially in other places with those shorthanded goals and the empty net goals. We'll find out if those shorthanded goals are sustainable. I'm with you. I feel like the trend looks like he's going to keep going up at least 83 points. Definitely with all those shots, so valuable in fantasy. I believe he's triple eligibility on Yahoo, if I recall correctly, center, left wing, and right wing. So this guy's just super valuable. Like, he should be drafted in the first couple rounds, I would think. Like, sky's the limit for Sebastian Aho. He's really good. The next player is someone, Brian, that you and I were debating who was going to be better next season. So we'll get to him in just a second. I'm saying between Aho and this guy. But for first, if you recall, listeners, we made a shout out on the last couple of if you recall, listeners, a couple episodes ago, we made a call out. We said we don't have any advertisements right now lined up for the summer. So if anyone wants to advertise anything for any amount of money, let us know. And why not? And so we got an email from Stephen Warbeck, who asked us to advertise the Kinsman and Kinnett clubs. Brian, have you heard of the Kinsman and Kinnett clubs?
I haven't heard of the Kinsman and Kinnett. No, let me just say that again. I have not heard of the Kinsman and Kinnett clubs.
Okay, well, I'll tell you about them and I'll tell everyone about them. These sound like very nice clubs. They are profit service organizations spread all across Canada. They are full of dedicated members who are always coming up with fun ways to raise money, which then goes directly back into the community. Building and maintaining parks, sponsoring local art and sports, giving scholarships to local students, assisting families in need. What? That's so nice. What a wholesome thing. The Kinsman and Kinnett clubs. Beautiful. We all want our communities to flourish and be great places to live. So if you believe in that, if you want your community to flourish and be a great place to live, maybe go out and join or support any of your local service clubs, Kinsman or another. We all have a common goal to improve our communities and the lives of those around us. So how nice is that? Thank you, Stephen, for giving us something to advertise on the show. And yeah, if you're interested, listener, check out the Kinsman and Kinnett clubs in your neighborhoods. Yeah, that's all I got to say about that.
Well, no, why don't? If you're in Canada, kincanada.ca will tell you where your local club is. And it seems like a really great initiative. Give back to your community, get involved, get out there. And it looks like you get to wear a snazzy red shirt too.
Wow. Okay. And offer code keeping. No, I'm just kidding. There's no offer code. Just go. Okay. So the player who, Brian, you and I had a debate about with Aho versus this guy, it was Jack Eichel. So that's the next guy I want to talk about. So, okay. But first, okay, going down the list of scores, where were we here? Aho, then was Burns, then was Eichel. So right there, 82 points for Eichel. I recall, Brian, that was our big controversial bet over the summer. You said Aho was going to get a better point pace. I said, you're crazy. Eichel's going to be better than Aho. But you were taking a swing on Aho, and you like really sounded really smart because you totally called that Eichel was going to be amazing. You totally called that Aho was going to be amazing, and you nailed it. I was right. Like Aho. Oh, man. I was right. Eichel did have a slightly better point pace than Sebastian Aho, but still, very good job, Brian, on making that call. But okay, let's talk about Jack Eichel, who people might be surprised. Wait, he's joining the 75-plus point club? He's been a superstar forever. The thing is, like last year when we were talking about Jack Eichel, I called him the biggest lock to join the 70-point club this year because he's already paced for 77 and 78 points in his previous 2 seasons, but injuries kept him from hitting 70 for real. And this season, he finally was able to get the games in. He played all but 5 games, and he put up 82 points in 77 games for an 87-point pace. There were a couple other players who I said were going to be locks to join the 70-point club this season. I went back and listened to that episode. I think it was a patron cast, actually. It was a patron cast, actually. I said Eichel was for sure going to get there. I said Austin Matthews was for sure going to get there, which I was right. He made it to 70-plus points. I also said he made it to a 75-plus point.
Wow. You got this.
He made it to a 70-plus point pace. I also said Philip Forsberg was going to be a lock to get there, and he didn't. that was a big whiff. He only paced for 64 points last season. So Philip Forsberg, you let us down. We talked about him actually during the summer series a little bit already. And Brian, you said you think he's going to really bounce back and be a nice value pick in your draft. So think about that when you're looking at Philip Forsberg. But we're talking about Jack Eichel here. Okay, so like I said, just barely beat out Aho, winning me our bet of who would have the better point pace. But my question to you is, Brian, do you want to go double or nothing on Eichel versus Aho for next season? This time around, you're picking Aho won't be as hot of a take. They pretty much paced for around the same number of points this past season. I think I still like Eichel better, but I'm curious to know what you think about him and his point projection versus Sebastian Aho.
What am I doubling if I win this double or nothing?
Well, you lost, so I'm the one who's doubling, and you could get back to nothing. That's how it works.
But so what do I stand to lose here?
So
since I stand to win nothing, it sounds like.
No, I have all the bragging rights.
If I even made that bet just slightly less ridiculous, you still would have taken it.
What do you mean less ridiculous?
Well, point per game was a bigger leap than I think I had to take.
I mean, we just said Eichel versus Aho. That was it. You're saying that you should have done a spread or something?
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, either way, I get all the bragging rights because I got it right. Excuse me, don't take away if you want to take back my bragging rights, you'll have to go double or nothing.
The odds were against me. So is it just for the bragging rights?
I get double the bragging rights, or I'll get no bragging rights.
Oh man, I'd love to find out what that looks like. So yes, I'm taking you up on that. I think that Aho is going to outpoint and outpace Jack Eichel in 2019, 2020.
Wow.
Eichel is someone who, like, when I look at his numbers, they're great. I like them, but I don't really need to look at them for very long. Look, he's a strong player. He has sustainable scoring numbers. Nothing really stands out that would indicate regression one way or the other for Eichel next season. The one thing that could have the greatest effect on Eichel's numbers next year, unfortunately for Eichel, is entirely out of his control, and that's what the Sabres decide to do about Jeff Skinner. Eichel had 54 assists last season. 21 of those were on Jeff Skinner's goals. Now, this isn't to say that Eichel would be screwed if Skinner doesn't re-sign for whatever reason. Eichel could be as responsible. This is like Marner and Tavares, right? Eichel could be as responsible for creating those goals, those 21 goals, as Skinner was for finishing them. For Pete's sake, the teammate who received the next most assistance from Eichel was Jason Pominville 8 times. So if Eichel can help Pominville even 8 times, he can probably help just about anyone that ends up on his line. Eichel also helped Sam Reinhart 8 times, which maybe is a little preview of the future if Skinner doesn't stay in Buffalo. But at this point, you have to think they get a deal done, right? Skinner's evolving wild contract projection is 8 years at $8.5 million, which would comfortably fit within Buffalo's $29 million of cap space. So again, you think that there's probably a way to get this done. It wouldn't be catastrophic for Eichel if Skinner left, but I would be a lot happier to know that Eichel doesn't have to start fresh with someone else who may or may not work out as well. So for now, I'm going to assume Skinner stays and that Eichel stays just above a point per game player and just the slightest touch below Sebastian Aho.
Brian, what about... okay, assuming everything stays the same, do we also need to give some credit to the fact that Rasmus Dahlin, he improved throughout the season? He was getting a lot of points, after a stretch when he finally got onto that top power play and stayed there. Maybe Dahlin gets better. That helps Eichel get a little bit better. I just feel like Buffalo, it's so frustrating, right? Because they have Eichel and Dahlin, these two amazing centerpieces. And yeah, they better get it done with Skinner, or if not, get a similar winger for him. I guess they could sign a Anders Lee. Is that a similar signing to Jeff Skinner? Zuccarello? I don't know. They need to get someone really good to be on that top line, because that would be ridiculous if you have Eichel and Dahlin and you end up just being bad year after year. It's almost inexcusable. It's almost like having McDavid and Draisaitl.
Yeah, you don't want to lose. It's not that Jeff Skinner is even slam dunk fantastic. He's a pretty good player. He's already 27 though. So, if you're going to have to give him term, I assume, if you want to get him on your team, and you're probably locking him up into his mid 30s. You look at other UFA options. I don't know, Matt Duchene, but he's a center. The RFAs, there's a lot of them. You're right though that Anders Lee is maybe the best comparable. Or what about Jordan Eberle? Is that I know that's ridiculous.
No, Eberle's good. You love Eberle. I can't
wait.
But
I don't know that he has the same ceiling as Skinner at this point.
Joe Pavelski, he's pretty good.
Yeah, also, well, he can play on the wing.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, so that's our Eichel conversation. You say he's going to be about the same, and hopefully he at least has Skinner. I'm saying maybe he could even be a little better, because I'm really excited about Rasmus Dahlin. People say he's the next Erik Karlsson. Usually people playing with Erik Karlsson get a lot of points themselves, so we'll wait and see. But yeah, it's probably going to be close again between Eichel and Aho. And last year I thought it was a crazy thing when you predicted that, but you were a brilliant genius and you got it right. This year I think that you're saying it again, and now you just sound like everyone else. So good for you. But you were ahead of the curve. So let's continue down.
No, they're all sounding like me.
Yeah, there you go. Everyone's going to try to be as good projectors as us. By the way, we talk about all these mistakes we made. We projected players wrong. First of all, Jack Eichel, we projected for 85 point pace, and he pretty much hit that. Aho, we projected for 75, so we were off, but we weren't off by so much. So we were good with those guys, and yeah, we were still right in the pack for projectors overall. We're just the ones telling you guys about our mistakes, so that's why we're sounding dumb, but we're okay. All right, so after Eichel came Phil Kessel, and he'd already done it before, but then Sean Monahan with 82 points in 78 games became the next inductee in the 75 plus point club. He had 82 points in 78 games. His previous career best was in the previous season, 2017-18, where he put up 64 points in 74 games for a 71 point pace. So he had paced above 70, but he had never actually hit it. And now he gets all the way up to 82 points. Brian, do you think that Sean Monahan has it in him again to be an 80-plus point player? I imagine everything should pretty much stay the same. He's going to center the top line with Johnny Gaudreau. He's going to be on the top power play. I don't know. I assume Elias Lindholm will still be there, and we'll actually be getting to him soon. Spoiler alert. So what do you think about Sean Monahan? Is what he did this season something that was a once-in-a-lifetime thing, and he's going to go back to being boring Sean Monahan around 65 points a year? Or are we looking at a new beast moving forward?
I'm actually going to cover all the Flames in one fell swoop.
Okay. Let me then tell them. Let me talk about all of them then. All right. Do you want? Because there's actually a few Flames that joined the 75 plus point club. So Elias Lindholm is the next. So I'm skipping down in the list, but we'll get to them later when I get to the actual list of NHL leading scorers. So Elias Lindholm, we've talked about him so much on the podcast. We've said this a bunch of times already. He had an amazing first 3 quarters of the season, then put up a turd of a final quarter, which included the fantasy playoffs for most people in head-to-head leagues. They were really disappointed with him, left a bad taste in people's mouths. Also didn't have a great actual NHL playoffs. But still, Lindholm ends up with 78 points in 81 games, crushing his previous career high of 45. 75 with the Canes. So you could bring him up. Then the other flame, if you're the listener, you could want to try to guess. It obviously isn't Johnny Gaudreau. He had done it before. So hopefully it's pretty obvious. Matthew Tkachuk. He joined the 75-plus point club, just like Sebastian Aho. It was his third season, and third time was the charm for Tkachuk to join the 75-plus point club. After a couple around 50-point seasons to start his career, though to be fair, he actually paced for 59 points a couple seasons ago and missed time with injury. But yeah, Tkachuk played 80 games last season and put up 77 points. And yeah, Brian, I guess, do you think that Tkachuk, Monahan, and Lindholm all had a special dinner together at the end of the season to celebrate all hitting the 75-point milestone in the same year? That must be a very special moment for the three of them. If yes, do you think they invited Johnny Gaudreau? Since like he's probably a big reason why they got there. So tell me, what are your thoughts on how this dinner went? Who do you think was there? Also, Giordano didn't get to 75, but he did get to 70 plus. So if we were doing 70-point club, we'd have 4 Flames on the list. So yeah, tell me about what you think this dinner was like to celebrate the end of the season. I guess it probably wasn't that great because they did get eliminated, upset in the first round of the playoffs, so they probably weren't too happy.
Yeah, hopefully the dinner happened just before the playoffs or like 3 weeks later when they all had some time to cool off. But I sure hope Johnny Gaudreau was invited. Not to take anything away from Monahan, Lindholm, and Matthew Tkachuk, but as Johnny Gaudreau goes, so do they. And Johnny sure was going last season. He returned to a shooting percentage in the mid-teens, and that's where Gaudreau had been in his first 2 years in the league before taking a 2-year-long dip that ended in 18-19. Gaudreau returned back to a 14% all-situation shooting percentage, and that helped him to career-high 36 goals, which helped Monahan and Lindholm to career-high assist totals, also helping Monahan and Lindholm, though, themselves, of course, is the two of those guys also set career highs in goals. Monahan bested his previous goals high watermark by 3, and Lindholm had 27 goals compared to his previous career high of 17. That's a whole 10-goal improvement over his previous career high. And like you said, Elon, you had 34 goals from Tkachuk, 17 from Mark Giordano, and you got a Flames team that had plenty of points to go around because they finished second in total goals for last season, behind only Tampa, tied with San Jose. And by and large, Calgary's scoring looked pretty sustainable. I mean, if I want to nitpick, Monahan may have had a couple more power play goals than he normally would have. Elias Lindholm still remains kind of a question mark, right? Like he shot 5, 6, 7% at even strength in his last 3 years in Carolina. Then he's a 12% shooter in Calgary, but with an identical 5-on-5 expected goals per 60, which tells me that his shots didn't appear to be any more dangerous, but almost twice as many went in. So that's something that makes me go, And if there were one Flame I'd think twice about drafting next year, it would be Elias Lindholm. But everyone else is probably already thinking twice about him because of his abysmal end to the season. Elon, has he even come up in our patron rankings yet?
Elias Lindholm?
Yeah.
No, not even close. Like I think like someone like Alex DeBrincat hasn't even been brought up yet, and I feel like he should be. So I think we're ways away from Elias Lindholm being mentioned because, yeah, such a risky pick. We're at the point now. So this patron rankings, something Dave Betton has set up, who's the ultimate cupful champion, by the way. So we have to always give Dave his kudos. So every day we vote on another player to get in our cupful patron rankings. We're on number 38 right now. Actually, just today, Patrick Laine got in a 26-player drop, but Laine gets on the list. Maybe a risky pick even at 38, but obviously big upside. But yeah, Lindholm hasn't been mentioned. Monahan actually hasn't even been placed yet, though he does have some votes. So Monahan's probably in the hopper to come up in the next 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, so Monahan would be the guy I want after Gaudreau. And then honestly, after that, I don't know if I'm looking at skaters, right? Because Giordano's somewhere in this mix too. But Matthew Tkachuk, I remember the moment early this season when I had to admit, honestly, I thought Tkachuk was like a 60, 65 point guy. He was scoring at this 75, 80 point clip. And I just, for the first couple of weeks, I was like, it's going to cool off. And then there was this moment where I've got to backtrack here. I think I judged too early, and Tkachuk looked like he had a sustainable scoring pattern. And it turned out that he did for the last, 60 games of the season once we finally revised that impression that we had of him, or at least that I had of him. Such an impressive season from Matthew Tkachuk. He's one of very few skaters landing in the top 50 in 5-on-5 points scored that did not spend substantial time on a top line. Like, Matthew Tkachuk barely spent any time or any time at all on a top line. I think he's got up there a couple times as Elias Lindholm was being shuffled off during those cold spells towards the end of the season. But the fact that Matthew Tkachuk was a top 55-on-5 scorer in the league without that deployment is like a real accomplishment and achievement for him that he deserves a lot of credit for. And at this point, I fully expect Matthew Tkachuk to match last year's production. And I fully expect him to potentially be a draft day steal as a result, as people look at Calgary's depth chart. It's like, oh yeah, I don't want a second line player. I'm not going to pick him as one of my first 93 skaters, one of my first 93 forwards. And then Tkachuk will maybe just be sitting there for you to take later on in your draft. So keep him high on your draft list. And then you've got to find the right time where, he's still hidden enough that you can still snipe him, but not too late that somebody else knows better too.
Right. Okay. So unpacking all of that, do you have Tkachuk or Lindholm as someone you would prefer more? I feel like Tkachuk seems like the more stable guy to pick because he's been on the second line and top power play and doing just fine, while Lindholm really benefited from playing on the top line. But even if he stays there, he was struggling near the end of the season. So I feel like his spot is a lot more volatile. If it was me, I'm taking Matthew Tkachuk. Like, I don't like, generally for my draft philosophy, I don't want to take a high upside player with also high downside with like an early pick. Like when we're talking about players who we think are going to get like 70 plus points, I'd rather play safe, take the guys I know. Even if I'm going to lose, let's say 5 points on the season by going with a safer choice, I'd rather take the person that's not going to turn out to be a bust. And obviously some players are impossible to predict. Like I would have drafted Patrick Laine last year and I would have been burned just like all the people who were. But yeah, Elias Lindholm, I definitely could see him hitting 70, 75 again if he plays all year in the same deployment. But I could also see him getting bumped at some point and like really falling. And the end of the last season, like I said, left a bad taste in my mouth. So yeah, I would take Tkachuk. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think I would take Tkachuk too. You're right. Like there's a sort of floor ceiling question here where, you're taking Tkachuk as someone that feels a little more reliable still at this point, that even on the second line, he put up such amazing production last season. So you figure he can probably do at least that again next year. Whereas Lindholm, like I said, still a question mark, still someone who I scratch my head about a little bit. And I'm actually very curious to know because owners have a reason to be shy to draft either of those guys. So I'm really curious to know who drops further than the other between Tkachuk and Lindholm, and also how far they both drop, because, if they're both available and people are like, oh, I'll take the guy that's still out there when my turn comes around. It'll be really interesting to see in this year's drafts. If it's me, yeah, I'm seeing Tkachuk as a little more of a certainty. So I will go him and sacrifice a bit of ceiling than that I'd be getting if I had drafted Lindholm.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess it's not completely outside the realm of possibility that Matthew Tkachuk gets on the top line. That would just be insane for his fantasy value, but it's probably not likely. Like, it hasn't happened yet, aside from like one game here or there. Okay, so going down our list, I guess I'll just do a quick edit point here. Brian, so that's all you prepped, but like we started like a half an hour late, so
yeah,
like it's only been like 45 minutes of show.
Damn, I totally miscalculated.
I told like I know generally how long it's gonna be. I told you it's gonna be like a regular amount of show. So you'll just have to. Do you want to just play it by ear, or what do you want to do?
Yeah. I mean, we'll just go and I'll do the best I can.
Yeah, you could always mention that, like when you're talking about someone, like I didn't dig as deep, and make an ad for the almanac or something to make up for it. To be like you'll hear a deeper dive then. Okay, so going down the list. Okay, going down the list. Okay, so we got to Sean Monahan with 82 points. That was good for 25th in the league, by the way, for anyone keeping track. Next was David Pasternak, Jonathan Taves, Tyler Seguin. All those guys had done it before, hit 75 at least. Next, Patrice Bergeron. Believe it or not, Brian, I probably was close to skipping by him, assuming he'd hit at least 75 before. But actually, no. Patrice Bergeron, 79 points in 65 games this season, was his first time getting in the 75 or even the 70 point club. His previous career high Oh, why didn't I write this down? Or did I? Oh yeah, his previous career high was 63 points in 2017-18. Of course, that was in 64 games. So actually, let me just verify that to make sure. I'll do that whole thing over again. Sorry, everybody.
Yeah, but you're right.
63 was his highest?
Mm-hmm.
Was it 63 points? Okay, so maybe I could just go from there.
Well, no, he had 68 points in 80 games, but that was his highest pace.
Oh yeah, no, so I was talking about, yes, a good thing I checked. Okay, he had 68 points. Oh, wait a minute. He had 70. What am I talking about? He had 73 points back in 2005.
I don't see that.
What did he have?
Oh, it's not on Frozen Pool. It doesn't go back that far.
But he never hit 75 points, so I'm still right to bring him on the list.
Man, Bergeron's been playing for so long.
Yeah. Okay. I wonder where I could go from here. Okay, I'll just keep.
Just start him over.
Okay. Then we get to Patrice Bergeron, who I almost skipped over. Like, I assumed he had gotten 75 plus points before, but I took a look and no, his 79 points in 65 games this season was his first ever time hitting that 75-point mark. He did come close in his second year in the league in 2005-2006. Bergeron's been around a long time, guys. He had 73 points in 81 games. He followed that up with a 70-point season, 70 points in 77 games. So maybe he could have gotten to 75 if he played the whole season. Then he just dealt with injuries for a lot. Then he had a few seasons where even though he was playing 80 and 81 games, he had 57, 64 points. Then, like 2 seasons ago, he was pacing at an amazing pace. He had 63 points in 64 games, so was playing at like an 82-point pace. But the injuries this season, he also dealt with injuries. Like I said, he only played 65 games, but he still was able to put up 79 points. So that just goes to show how amazing of a season Patrice Bergeron had. If anything, like the question isn't if we think he's good enough to hit 75-point pace again. I feel like the real question is whether, like, should we predict if he's going to be able to play around 70 games? I feel like if he plays around 70 games, he'll probably get to 75 points. But it's going to be hard because he keeps getting injured every season. So I don't know, Brian, probably you'll say that maybe his pace this season, which was his highest ever, maybe was a bit like unsustainable. I think we've talked about him even before since the Bruins have been going all the way through the playoffs. Oh yeah, there's the Bruins talk for all the Bruins fans expecting that we were going to talk about them a lot. So yeah, Patrice Bergeron, by the way, not having the best playoffs. Like going into yesterday's game, he only had 13 points in 20 playoff games. So points-wise, obviously he's having a pretty good playoffs because his team keeps winning, but points-wise, he wasn't doing that good. Of course, yesterday he had 3 points in the big romp over the Blues. So that obviously helps his overall totals. And I'll bet you he's got some hidden lingering injury or something that's maybe holding him back a little bit. Like that's usually what happens with guys, like especially with a guy like Patrice Bergeron. Anyway, yeah, Bergeron hits the 75-point club. I feel like he should be a lock to do it again next season if he plays around 70 games, but that's a big if because he has a lot of trouble doing that year in and year out.
Yeah, and he's another year older, right? He's going to be heading into his age 34 season, and it's pretty amazing that Patrice Bergeron is like hitting his stride again, like for the second time. He's bookending his career with the most offensively productive hockey of his life, both as a 20-year-old and now 13 years later as a 33-year-old. And so how's he doing it? Well, I don't know if you remember, this is a while ago, but the year he set that career high 73 points, it was his sophomore season, and he took 310 shots on goal, and that remains the highest shots on goal total in a season to date for him. I believe if we paced out his shots on goal for the last couple seasons, he still wouldn't have surpassed that, even if you account for the time that he's been missing due to injury. So he was firing at the net like no other season at the start of his career and shooting about 9 or 10%. And that's about where he's been for about the entirety of his career until all of a sudden, age 32 season, shooting percentage jumps up to 13%. This year, it jumps up to 15.5%. But I don't know if that is sustainable or if it's just like a 2-year-long blip and that he's bound to go back down to 10%. I'm looking at his expected goals numbers, both on the power play and at 5-on-5, and I'm not seeing anything that really stands out over and above production from past seasons. You look at his expected goal rates at 5-on-5, and yeah, they're higher than they were in sort of like the valley of his career in terms of offense. But they're not over and like they're not crazy impressive in the way that makes me think, oh yeah, this is all bound to stick. Of course, another factor in Patrice Bergeron suddenly becoming a big offensive producer again is the emergence, and it's crazy. We talked about this last week. The emergence of Brad Marchand, who is now an offensive threat, which he never was up until like 3 seasons ago now. So Bergeron has that weapon now. They're working together. They're doing great things at even strength. They have one of the most dangerous lines in hockey. Then you throw Pastrnak into the mix. Then you throw 7 short-handed points for Bergeron last season into the mix. 5 empty net goals. These are both things that, you know, he usually has a couple empty net goals and a few short-handed points, but those helped bump up his pace all the way up to 100 instead of being like in the 90, 95 area. As for what to expect next season from Patrice Bergeron, Elon, I don't know. Like, if I have you right, you're saying that you expect him to continue, right? Like, if he played all 82 games, do you think he can repeat even a 95-point pace?
Well, I was saying that I need him to play 70 to get back in the 75-point club. So I think that would put him at around like a 90-ish point pace. So that's probably where I'm going to put him, like 90 to 95 pace. But I don't think he's going to play all 82 games. So you definitely have to take that into account. But the way I see it, I almost feel like you're a little bit overthinking it, like with him in terms of like all these percentages and stuff, just because you've already said last episode that you thought Marchand is going to get 100 points again. I feel like Pastrnak is like more of a lock than Marchand to get 100 points. So I don't know, like how can you play on the top line and top power play with these 200-point players and not get like around 90 yourself? Like I just don't see how that would click. So
right. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm not sure about a 100-point pace from Bergeron, especially because he's not taking, like this season, he had 20 fewer shots in the same amount of games that he played 2 seasons ago in 17-18. So that wasn't like something that was overly assuring. I think he's taken less shots as Marchand and Pastrnak have emerged. So that's why I'm a little bearish on him getting all the way up to 100 points. But you're right. It would be overthinking it to think that if he plays with those guys and that power play still keeps clicking the way it did this season, that Bergeron should end up with anything less than 90 points. Like it still sounds like a lot for Patrice Bergeron. I know when you said like you were going through to see where he fit, like surely he's gotten 75 points before, and oh my gosh, he hasn't. But it's also, so on one hand, it's weird to think he hasn't gotten to 75 before. On the other hand, Bergeron and 90, 95 points just together do not roll off the tongue so easily.
Well, don't forget, 75 is the new 70. So that means that 90 is like the new 85. And he's like a play per game. Like he's really good. And he's playing with like these 2 players that are so amazing. He's amazing. I'm worried about the injuries. That's the reason why he's going to potentially fall in your draft list. And if you're in a head-to-head league, we've given this advice before, you don't have to worry so much about injuries. Like obviously there's the big risk that he gets injured when you need him most in your fantasy playoffs, like Malkin always tends to do, and Chris Letang often does that too. But you know, if he misses time in like November and then again in like February, and then like you lose a couple of weeks or you have to like make do without him for a couple of weeks, like, you know, it's worth it to have him for the weeks that count and for like the majority of matchups in your season. So I wouldn't be too worried about him. And I guess he probably won't fall too far in drafts, even with the injury risk, just because of all the exposure he's getting now in the playoffs and just this amazing point pace. But he's definitely a guy I'd be happy to get, you know, in the second, like 3rd round, like latest, but probably he'll go like in our patron rankings. He's got to be he went 27th because also in a league that counts shots, like a couple, he's not getting like 310 shots like you said he got in like a second season, but he's still a really big shooter. So in a league that gives you points just for shots on goal, regardless of if they go in or not, Bergeron's like a really valuable guy in fantasy. So good for him joining the 75-point club. Another milestone, another accomplishment for Patrice. So as we keep going down the list, after Bergeron comes Elias Lindholm, we already talked about. Then we've got Ryan O'Reilly, who is our next inductee into the 75-plus point club, another person still playing currently in the Stanley Cup Finals. So there's our St. Louis Blues content for the week. So O'Reilly ended the season with 75 points in 82 games. Clearly he's enjoying his life. Like what a lucky guy, right? He was in Buffalo, losing all the time, never even got into the 70-point club. Now he comes to St. Louis. He gets to the 75-plus point club for the first time ever with 77 points, makes to the Stanley Cup Finals. Wow, what a year for Ryan O'Reilly. I asked you last episode if you take Ryan O'Reilly over Tarasenko, and you went with Tarasenko, even though O'Reilly had more points last season, though we were like saying, I bet Tarasenko has winger eligibility, and there's like some other reasons in fantasy why you'd prefer him. But like, was any of your reason for preferring Tarasenko over Ryan O'Reilly because you think that Ryan O'Reilly will be a one and done in the 75-point club, or do you like his chances to stick around in this range of point pace on the Blues, at least till he hits his 30s? Let's say he's currently 28.
O'Reilly was hard to assess because in 17-18 he got buffaloed, right? He played for the Sabres. He was all over the place with who he was playing with. For example, his most common line mates were Sam Reinhart and Kyle Okposo, but he never played with them at the same time. So he was either with Reinhart and a random or Okposo and a random. And the randoms were most often Benoit Pouliot, Evander Kane was in there for a bit, Scott Wilson, Zemgus Girgensson, Jason Pominville, Jordan Nolan, Johan Larsson. Like, these are all names of players who you don't want to be spending a whole lot of time with. And I don't know also what was up with Buffalo last season in 17-18, right? Because they had O'Reilly say that he didn't want to play hockey anymore at one point. And then at the start of 18-19, Patrick Berglund, who had just gotten there, was like, actually, I'm out. Like, I'm skipping out on this guaranteed contract that I just signed and like taking care of myself. So I don't know what was happening in Buffalo. I hope everybody in the situation has turned out okay. I know Ryan O'Reilly's hockey situation sure has. And a lot of the difference was simply St. Louis is a better place to play than Buffalo. I already outlined one reason. It was the line mates. Another reason was that Ryan O'Reilly, when I say he got buffaloed for a few years now, Buffalo and Carolina, any player who went to either of those teams suffered from these low shooting percentages. Ryan O'Reilly shot just 5% in 2017-18. He was able to shoot 11% at 5-on-5 in 2018-19. And not just that, he took more shots than he ever had in his career. He attempted more shots than he ever had in his career. There were a lot of things that Ryan O'Reilly like just seemed to not even be like close to doing in Buffalo. In Colorado, in the first few years of his career, yeah, he was sort of on the doorstep to the St. Louis season, but then sort of had that dip in Buffalo where he just couldn't quite get it together as a Sabre. The Sabres just couldn't quite get him together. In any case, his season in St. Louis was a big success, and it was really because of his even strength production. He had almost identical points on the power play compared to his Buffalo time, but at even strength, he had double as many 5-on-5 points in 18-19 as he did in 17-18, and still a good deal more than he had in 16-17 with Buffalo. Also, like I said, shooting more often, career high 234 shots on goal, scored 28 times on them because he had a healthy shooting percentage to go with it. And that's the reason why Ryan O'Reilly had such a good year this year. Now he's 28 years old. This was his age 27 season. So we go by February 1st. He's a February 7th birthday. So he's going to be his age 28 season coming up, which makes me feel like he can repeat what he did. Is he like a lock to break 75 points? I'm not going to say an absolute lock, but I am going to, like, he's someone who's going to flirt with 75 points, right? The right amount of variance could either push him just a little bit over or keep him just a little bit below. But I think he's a pretty good bet to fall somewhere within like 72 to 77 points.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Like, he's not a lock for 75, but I think he's a really safe bet. Kind of like a Matthew Tkachuk, but maybe even a safer bet just because you know he's going to get the really good deployment. Yeah, like I feel like Ryan O'Reilly, you draft him as a 75-ish point guy, you're going to get a 75-ish point guy. And Brian, like, I still don't get this trade. Like, why did Buffalo trade him? They got Sabatka, Patrick Berglund, Tage Thompson, and a pick. And it wasn't like O'Reilly was a pending unrestricted free agent or anything. Like, he was locked in for like a decent contract, $7.5 million a year. Like, what a weird trade. Like, who's Buffalo's second line center? I guess Casey Middle. I guess they thought, oh, we have Casey Middlestat. We don't need Ryan O'Reilly anymore. But like, O'Reilly could have played the wing. Like, they could have figured something out. Like, that seems like a really dumb trade.
I'm pretty sure there were some off-ice factors involved, the same way that there were when he left Colorado. Although I think those centered around his dad, and I'm not sure in Buffalo it was the
Oh
same
man.
thing. So I don't know that Buffalo was really happy to make this deal. I feel like they had to, and they had no leverage. So yeah, they didn't get a great return. We'll see what kind of player Tage Thompson turns out to be, but it seems like, I mean, obviously a really great price to pay for the St. Louis Blues, seeing as Ryan O'Reilly is one of the key pieces that has brought them this close to a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, if I'm ever hired, okay, I'm putting my pitch out there right now. If any team wants to hire me as their GM, my number one rule would be I'm not trading players because of off-ice issues. Like, if a player tells me, like, oh, I don't want to play here, you should trade me, I'll be like, F you. You're under contract. If you want to go and sabotage yourself, go ahead. If you try to, like, what is he? He's a professional. He's not going to sabotage the team. He's going to go out there. He's going to put up a 70+ point pace. So I don't believe that. Like the Sens trading Mike Hoffman for nothing. Like, just these trades, like I don't believe in them. Like I guess like some people really believe in like locker room chemistry and whatever, but I feel like these are like grown adults that are professionals getting paid millions of dollars. It's just hard for me to imagine that they're going to be so affected by like someone being like unhappy and like, or maybe it was unhappy for another reason. I don't know. I'm like talking as if I know something when I don't know anything, but I'm saying like these trades, these like stupid trades, and then they're like, oh, it's because of off ice issues. I just feel like, come on, give me a break.
So I think a lot of GMs have tried that tack and it didn't, like, I don't know that it works. Like if a player wants to go, a player wants to go. And I think it might impact the team as a whole or impact at least that player's ability. But Elon, like you're just not going like deep enough to the root. I thought you were going to say if you were GM of a hockey team, your first like goal would be keep players happy. Just like don't even get to the point where they can be
Well,
disgruntled.
I mean, obviously that's the goal, but you know,
I think
sometimes.
if you treat everyone right and like take care of people, they're not going to
Sure.
walk out on you. Like
By the way,
how
I
many
could
teams?
tell.
Like we know Detroit love, the Illich family, like worshipped in Detroit, and I think that's because of the way they treated their players. And what players ever tried to force their way out of being a Red Wing?
Yeah, but I don't care. Like I would say, like, fine. So O'Reilly, noted, you want to be traded, play really well, and we'll hopefully get an offer for you that's worth it. Like I'm not saying not to trade him, but don't like trade him for nothing just because like it's not as if they had to make this trade because who do they get for him? Which of these players even was significant on the Sabres? The answer is none of them. Maybe Tage Thompson will one day. Anyway, whatever. Let's continue down our list of 75 plus point players. Bit of a tongue twister. I've been doing it right all episode long, but it is getting a little late for us. So where were we? Monahan. Okay, Kessel. I already said him. Pasternak, Taves. Oh, we already. Okay, Patrice Bergeron, Ryan O'Reilly. Okay, there we are. Next was Matthew Tkachuk with 77 points. We already talked about him. Sean Couturier next. He actually hit the 75+ point club 2 seasons ago. So look at Sean Couturier, 2 seasons in a row, 75+ points. Next, Alex DeBrincat lands in the 75+ point club for his first time. Welcome to the club, Alex DeBrincat. He had 76 points in 82 games. He's the first sophomore on our list. So he's of all the players that were in the NHL for only their second season, he was the highest scorer with those 76 points. He put up 52 points in 81 games as a rookie in 2017-18. Then he crushed that last season. 41 goals, 76 points in 82 games. Brian, I'm just going to tell you, I love Alex DeBrincat. I want to get him.
Why?
I'll tell you. Clearly I wasn't just ending my sentence there. I love him because I feel like I want to get him in all my drafts next year. Like I just feel like I know that his stock is high, but I feel like it's not high enough almost. Like I feel like still like he hasn't even been nominated yet for the patron rankings. Like Patrick Laine, it just got put up, like I said, on 38, and there's a bunch of players who have at least one vote. And DeBrincat's not even on the list. Like he doesn't have a vote yet. And like guys who've been put up are guys like Larkin, Giroux, Gabriel Landeskog, Mark Stone. Like I feel like to me, I don't know. You'll tell me if I'm wrong. Like DeBrincat deserves to be on that list. This guy's been scoring so many goals. Like in his junior career, he had like 65 goals in 63 games his last season with Erie. He was like one of these guys who's getting like crazy points all through the minors. Then 2 years later, as a 21-year-old, so this is last season, 41 goals. And this is like his second year in the pros. I feel like Chicago hopefully will get better. Like, hopefully he'll play with Dylan Strome longer and Dylan Strome will continue to gain chemistry with him, or I don't know what's going to happen, but he's like now a fixture on the top power play. Like I feel like DeBrincat's probably I don't know. I like him. I feel like he's going to keep going up, or at the very least stay the same, which was very, very valuable last season in fantasy. So let me know. Am I too high on him? I just feel like this guy has a lot of potential. I could see him getting like 85 points next season, like 45 goals.
A ton of potential. Can I share one theory about why you like him so much?
Okay, go for it.
Well, his name is DeBrincat, and you were a big fan of Felix the Cat Potvin, weren't
Oh,
you?
I also was a big fan as a kid of Theron Fleury, who was a smaller in stature player, just like Alex DeBrincat. So maybe I do have a type. But I just feel like DeBrincat's one of those guys who it's like the Braden Point. Like he had a really good second season, and I still feel like he'll fall in drafts just far enough that you could still get him for great value, like one last time before, like in 2 seasons when we're talking next summer, it's going to be like obviously you draft DeBrincat in like the first couple of rounds. Well, this year you might still be able to get him like the fourth, fifth round, something like that.
Yeah, I think this is probably the last season that you can sort of get him a little later than you should. I like it's a little early to know if there are red flags about him, right? Because we're still establishing a baseline for what we should expect from him year in, year out. And one thing that does raise my eyebrows just a little is his power play goal scoring. He scored 13 power play goals on just 52 shots. So he's somewhere between Braden Point and Sebastian Aho in power play scoring, but closer to Braden Point, closer to being a little unsustainable. Now, the question with Braden Point was, can his growth, and development as a hockey player wash out any regression? Well, for Alex DeBrincat, it's going to be easier because there's less regression on his plate that we should be worried about. One other thing to love about Alex DeBrincat is just how many shots he fires on net. Top 50 in shot rates and shot attempt rates, which like isn't awesome, except for the fact that he's 21 years old in his second NHL season. He got a big boost in responsibility this season, almost 3 minutes a night more on average than in his rookie season. So that bodes well for him. That was under a new coach too, Jeremy Calderton, who seems to have a lot of faith in DeBrincat to make him one of his most oft played forwards. And like you said, Elon, there is enough in Chicago right now for Alex DeBrincat to play with, right? He's going to get Patrick Kane or like Dylan Strome maybe is someone good to play with also.
Or Jonathan Taves.
Or Jonathan Taves, yeah. So, yeah. I mean, I'd prefer Patrick Kane, and if Dylan Strome's ceiling is as high as it seems, and I might even prefer Strome to Taves, but he's going to get some mix of that. Like, he's not going to be left all alone. So I agree with your optimism for next year. I wonder if he can't, like, I just don't know how high the ceiling is. I know I want to go up to 85, 90 points as something he can achieve, maybe even 95, 100 at some point. I just don't know how soon he's going to get there. I want to see another year from him. He's been an amazing shooter, by the way, over 17% over about 400 shots in his 2-year career. So I'd like to see him play another year. Let's see if he still shoots that successfully, and then I'll be ready to really confidently project him. For now, I'm going to give him 75, 80 points and feel really bad about it. Like that's something I could definitely, even just saying it, see myself changing by the time we release our almanac to make higher.
Yeah, well, obviously, we're going to do a lot more research when we do the second ever NHL audio almanac, which you could pre-order, keepingkarlsson.com/almanac. We might raise the price at some point, by the way. So with no advance notice required. So you can get it now. Lock in that great price. A special deal, by the way, for the patrons, 10% off. So if you first sign up as a patron for any amount, you can sign up for $1 as a patron. Look at this deal I'm throwing out here. Sign up as $1 for a patron, keepingkarlsson.com/patron. Then you get your link to get 10% off the almanac, and then you're golden, and you'll hear us talk and me gush over Alex DeBrincat for a little longer in the Chicago chapter of the NHL Audio Almanac. Yeah, like Chicago is going to be a fun team next year to project. Like, I think it's going to be tough because I feel like Eric Gustafsson. Is that that's the defenseman, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I feel like Eric Gustafsson had such an amazing season, and he's going to be a really fun guy to project because there's this guy, Adam Boqvist, who might make the team, supposed to be a really good defenseman. So that's going to be a tough team to come up with projections for with a lot of young players that we haven't seen a lot from, just like you said. But DeBrincat also, like, just his junior career was so impressive. So, like, I know you want to see more data on the NHL level, of course, but the fact that he was able to score all those goals in junior and then followed up and become a 40-goal scorer as a 21-year-old in the NHL, just to me, just says that he's got a lot to go.
Speaking of defensemen and Eric Gustafsson, I wonder if a future episode idea is we try and establish what the 75-point mark is for defensemen and see who entered that club for the first time.
Yeah, maybe we'll do we'll find some club where there was like around 35, or maybe it'll be fewer, right? Like 25 defensemen who broke that threshold. Maybe that could be the next episode. Who knows? So tweet at us at Keeping Karlsson. Let us know. So we've got 2 more players, Brian, that I want to induct into the 75+ point club. So going down our list here, we were at Alex DeBrincat. Next came, Jake Guentzel. So no, 3 players more. But Jake Guentzel will be a quick conversation because we had a long chat about him in the last episode when we were talking about players that we got our projections wrong for. So yeah, Guentzel, great season. Ends it with 76 points in 82 games when his previous high was, a lot lower, especially because he had a really great rookie season. Then he followed that up with a lot of hype, and then he ended up not doing as well as people expected. He was in like the 55, 60 point range. Then last year, he was amazing, played all season with Crosby. And I think when we talked about him, your answer to whether or not he could repeat it was a resounding maybe. So that's probably still where you are right now. We'll see how the offseason goes for Pittsburgh with Phil Kessel. That would, I think, be really great news for Guentzel if Kessel gets traded. There's a power play 1 spot that opens up for Jake Guentzel. So I feel like, he's probably going to stick in that spot.
Yeah, I think, again, go back and listen to what we said about Guentzel for the whole thing. But Cole's notes, Elon, it wasn't a resounding maybe about whether Guentzel can get 75. It was a probably 75. And and we mentioned how he finished the season playing on the top power play unit. So that felt like it boded well for him to be able to continue doing that in 1920, which would help him at least get to 75 points and hopefully over 80.
Okay, so Brian, we have 2 more players who had over 75 or more points this season, and both of them are new members of the 75+ point club. First up, Teuvo Teravainen. So we've got another Carolina Hurricane. We already talked about Aho so long ago with his 90+ points, but Teravainen did squeak in there with 76 points in 82 games, beating out his 64 points in 82 games a couple seasons ago. My big question for Teuvo is that he was split up with Aho at the end of the season. Remember, there was that Aho, Niederreiter, Williams line. That was all the rage during the fantasy playoffs. That's what I was thinking when I started doing my write-up here about Teuvo Teravainen. But then I took a look, and actually, Teravainen ended the season with 21 points in his final 20 games. So clearly, being away from Aho didn't affect him all that much at all. So maybe Teravainen is kind of like a Matthew Tkachuk, where he's just so good that he could put up points no matter who he plays with on the first or the second line. So yeah, do you think that he's just good enough to be a 75+ point guy and we don't even have to try to predict who his line mates will be? Or do you think that he's someone where you'd be nervous if he's not playing with Aho?
You said how many points in his last how many games?
21 points in his final 20 games.
Okay. Do I have to be nervous that he's not playing with Aho? Okay. You have to be a little nervous if he's not going to play with Sebastian Aho. And I think in our almanac, when we talk about Teravainen, we'll get a little bit more into the with and without you situation and see how the on-ice numbers as a whole, like shot attempt share and rote shot attempts, and expected goals for Teravainen's both with and away from Sebastian Aho. But like at a glance, it looks like Teravainen did need Sebastian Aho by a fair amount. He assisted on no one's goals more than he did on Sebastian Aho's. 16 goals of Aho's were created by Teuvo Teravainen. So like there was a pretty important relationship working between the two of them. After Aho, Teravainen assisted most on Dougie Hamilton's goals 7 times and Michael Furlan's goals 7 times, and then Justin Falk's goals 5 times. So a lot of involvement with the defenseman. That's the thing with Teravainen, right? He's not a big shooter. He barely registers 2 shots on goal per game, and he really his bread and butter is picking up assists. One item that was his bread and butter last season, and this is what we mentioned about Aho, they picked up a lot of shorthanded points together. So my wondering aloud about whether Aho can repeat that is going to be the same thing for Teuvo Teravainen, because this was a new penalty kill role he had, and he put up 5 shorthanded points. The only other season in which he's had any kind of penalty kill role, which was pretty similar to this last one, he just had 1 shorthanded point. So that was that's a few extra points for him right there. That's a few extra points for him right there. He also might have shot a little over his head, or a little, no. He also might have punched a little bit above his weight in goal scoring on the power play. This is a guy who's traditionally scored on 10% of his power play shots. He scored on twice as many this year, setting a career high 8 power play goals. So you knock off some of those if he does regress there. And that plus shorthanded points for me definitely takes him below 75 points, especially if he doesn't play with Aho. Like, it's really great that he succeeded towards the end of the season without Sebastian Aho, but that's not a situation I would be really excited to play out. And again, in our almanac, I'll probably take a look at what the on-ice shooting percentage was during the stretch that he was away from Sebastian Aho, and how often. Like, he picked up 18 assists in those 21 games. 5 of them were on the power play. So of the 13 even strength ones, I would love to know how often shots were going in, and if that was really just a nice stretch of on-ice shooting percentage by his teammates. So these are still question marks about Teravainen. The good news for anybody still hoping that he can crack 75 points again is that he is going to be just 24 this season. So he's still young. He's still taking steps forward. He's inching towards his prime. So you hope some natural growth can help take him over the 75 point mark. But as we get, like we're going in order from the top guys to the bottom guys, we're really finding our way to these guys who really are just one piece of variance away from overshooting it or coming short. If I had to bet on Teravainen, man, it's almost like a push. Like, I would take the over on 74.5 for him. I'm going to stay optimistic. I'm going to feel like Carolina, everyone in Carolina, Teravainen, Niederreiter, Aho, Hamilton, everyone's going to take a step forward, Svechnikov, and that's going to be to the whole team's benefit.
I might take the under. I don't know, maybe closer to 70. Maybe he'll be a guy we disagree on in the almanac. Like, you were so convincing to me with how he had too high of a shooting percentage on the power play and all these shorthanded points. So I don't know.
So on the one hand, like, to summarize it all, like, yeah, it feels like it all cancels itself out. I guess I was trying to say over because I sounded bearish on O'Reilly, and I wanted to try and be optimistic about Teravainen. That's a trap I think I fell into on our last almanac. So I should be careful, because I'm saying, yeah, these 5 shorthanded points, maybe not sustainable, because I'm saying, yeah, these 5 shorthanded points, maybe not sustainable. Power play goals, maybe should have only had 4 or 5 instead of 8. And a year of development maybe is not enough to wash those out. But all those other guys getting better around him helps. It's really close. 74 points.
Okay, and plus, don't forget, Carolina is going to still have to mix things up. By the time we record the almanac, they're going to look a little different. Like, Furland and Williams, I believe, are not coming back next year. Maybe Williams will resign. So there's some open spots potentially in the top 6. Maybe Carolina makes a splash on free agency, though I guess mainly they need to worry about goaltending first before they try to find some top 6 players to sign. So it'll be interesting, and we'll definitely circle back when we get to the Carolina chapter of the almanac. But Brian, okay, we're down to our last player who cracked the 75-point club for his first time ever with exactly 75 points, Gabriel Landeskog. But that's selling him short, because he got 75 points in only 73 games. So he actually crushed his previous career high pace, because he had 65 points in 2013-14. He paced for like 80 plus points this past season, like 85 points. Landeskog also had 62 points in 78 games a couple seasons ago, back when Rantanen and McKinnon first took their huge steps forward. So did that all make sense? I guess so. So yeah, I feel like Landeskog, he's going to be a tough guy to predict for next year. Like with Teravainen, I have a few concerns. about line mates. Like I have a bit of a concern with Landeskog about if he's going to stick with McKinnon and Rantanen next season for as long as he did this past season. Like he was getting switched off a couple times near the end of the season and in the playoffs for short stretches. And with Landeskog, I'm actually like a little less certain that he's going to be able to repeat away from those two guys. Like I feel like being on the second line in Colorado is like a very big difference from being on the top line. So I feel like Landeskog's success is going to be super tied to whether or not he could stick on the top line with McKinnon and Rantanen. If he stays with them, McKinnon and Rantanen just seem like they're just getting better and better. So I feel like it would be really hard for Landeskog not to crack the 75 plus point pace club again, considering he paced for like 85 next season. But yeah, he's a tough one. We were actually having a debate in the couple rankings last week about whether Landeskog is really a point per game player or if like the approximately 65 point Landeskog that he was before is like closer to reality. I'm curious to know like where you land here. Is he at least getting back to 75 next season, or do you think he's going to fall back to be the 65-ish guy he was before?
Well, one way he got to 75 was by scoring a career high 34 goals and also a career high 41 assists. But let's focus on the goals for a minute, because 34 goals, you need to be a shooter to get 34 goals. And Landeskog took 243 shots this season, which was the second highest total of his career. And that's like straight up total, not accounting for games missed. If you look at 82 game pace, this was Landeskog's highest shot rate of his career, especially given the minutes he played. Oh, that doesn't make sense. This was Landeskog's highest shots on goal pace of his career. Part of that is these weren't the highest shot rates of his career, but he is playing 3 more minutes a night than he was at the start of his career when he came in with these really high shot rates that got us all excited, all hot and bothered about how often Gabriel Landeskog was throwing pucks on net his first 3 years in the league. Huge numbers for shots and shot attempts. And then he was totally cut off. 4 years of shooting not very much, and the last 2 were particularly dire. He had about 6.5 shots per 60 minutes. This year, 9 shots per 60 minutes, and that's a big jump. That's the highest shot rate he's put up at 5-on-5 since his sophomore season. So way to go, Gabriel Landeskog. And he did that all while putting up a very respectable shooting percentage. It didn't look too high. It didn't look too low, for sure. So 34 goals on what would pace out to be about 275 shots for the entire season is kind of promising for Gabriel Landeskog. Another thing that's really promising from this season is that his power play numbers really came through. Last season, he was on this top unit a whole lot, right? Super powerful top unit with McKinnon and Rantanen, but his IPP was garbage. He had a 40% IPP, which means he just was not getting in on the action. This year, that changed. He got back up to a more normal 60% IPP, and that helped him improve his power play point totals from 17 in 17-18 to 26 points in 18-19. And that's essentially it for Gabriel Landeskog. So he was able to get involved more on the power play. He was able to shoot more at even strength. And the cherry on top, by the way, about that even strength shooting is that his shots were registering as more dangerous, according to expected goals, than they have since his rookie season. Like his last few years, he was really lost. Like it looked like he was not shooting a lot, and his shots weren't coming from dangerous places or dangerous contexts. And this year he solved both of those problems at once. So we saw the first 2 years of Gabriel Landeskog in the NHL, and then we just saw the third year if things were supposed to go the way like we hoped they would. But he spent like 5 years wandering in the desert. Now he's finally arrived at the promised land to pick up where he left off after his sophomore season. I'm hopeful that he can get 75 points again. I know, Elon, this line thing is difficult to get around, and I guess we'll see what Colorado does in the offseason. But Colorado, it still feels like they don't have much of a choice. If they're wanting to spread out their offense, it's got to be Landeskog, McKinnon, and Rantanen, right? Like you move one off the line. Like
you got a glitch. Can you say Landeskog? It's got to be.
Yeah. It's got to be Landeskog, McKinnon, and Rantanen, right? And if one person does get moved off, it's probably Landeskog but then I feel like he doesn't necessarily anchor a line, and the third piece on the top line might also not do a whole lot. So I don't know if they really get a whole lot of bang for that buck. Some of this depends on how big a step forward Tyson Jost takes and how well he can, if he can potentially center a second line. That's something I want to see next year.
Yeah, I just feel like Colorado might try again since we saw them doing it. They might try again to move Landeskog off that top line to shake things up, and that I think would be catastrophic. If you're a Landeskog owner, you would be scrambling because that he'd still be on the top power play. He wouldn't be droppable, but he wouldn't necessarily be a point per game player. So he's a bit of a risky pick, but huge upside as we saw. Plus, if he's in a bangers league, Plus, if you're in a bangers league, you got all those hits that he throws, which are very nice as well.
He would essentially have to pull a Matthew Tkachuk, right? If that's what happened, if he got shuffled off to the second line. And to pull a Matthew Tkachuk, he would need better line mates than, like, who would he be with at this point? Like Carl Soderberg and Matt Nieto?
Yeah, I mean, it's not happening. If Landeskog is not playing on the top line all season, I see him as like a 60-point player. But if he's on the top line, I see him like, whatever. Like you can take away at least half of his even strength points, probably more. Anyway, okay. So that's it for the 75+ point club. Brian, how about just for fun? You don't have to respond to them, only if you want. I am just going to tell you the players that would have join the 70-point club if we were doing that. There's a bunch of players who broke 70 for the first time, but we had to raise the bar because so many players got into the 70-point club this year, and we don't do 4-hour episodes of Keeping Karlsson. So, Brian, I'm just going to give the list just for fun, and then if you want to comment on anyone, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to, but here it is for your listening pleasure. Here we go. Mika Zibanejad, 74 points. His previous high was 51 back with Ottawa. Tomas Hertl, 74 points. His previous high was 46. Mark Giordano, the first defenseman on the list to get to 70+ for the first time. 74 points when his previous high was 56. Dylan Larkin, 73 points. His previous high was 63. He's clearly on the rise, a DeBrincat type IMO. Mark Stone, 73 points in 77 games. He actually paced for a lot higher. The previous season, he had 62 points in 58 games, but he had never actually gotten to 70+ points. Austin Matthews, 73 points in only 68 games. So he is one of those guys that's for sure going to pace for more than 75 points. If he could play a full season, we're probably looking at closer to like an 85-point guy. Max Domi, Brian, the guy who was the bane of your projections all throughout the season. You kept saying he'd slow down. He did at times, but he still ended the season with 72 points in 82 games. His previous high was when he had 52 points as a rookie. Morgan Riley, so another defenseman, 72 points when he previously had 52 as his best, which was the season before. And before that, he was like a 40-point guy. So Riley's been on a huge surge. Evgeny Dadonov hit 70 this past season. He had 65 the year before, though he also paced for around the same. John Karlsson, 70 points when he had 68 the year before. Mike Hoffman, 70 points. And Logan Couture, 70 points. Those are the new members of the 70-point club if we want to be completist. But yeah, the ones we've dug into were the 75+ guys. You want to talk about any of these guys, or shall we close out the show?
Zibanejad, Larkin, Stone, Matthews, and maybe Dadonov are my bets to return to the 75-point club, maybe even. John Karlsson, like if I had to pick a defenseman out of the group, you mentioned him, Giordano, and Morgan Riley, he'd be the one I choose. And Evgeny Dadonov is my bubble guy, which leaves Couture, Hoffman, and Tomas Hertl not hitting 70 points again or having a shot at 75 in my estimation. But I've been wrong before.
Well, also you'll dig into them a little more than just off the cuff like this when we record the almanac. You left out Max Domi. I assume you don't like him.
Oh yeah,
You hate Max Domi's good. Like we used to think he was going to get there. Now, like he has that good season, and now you hate him more than ever. So that's pretty fun. Tomas Hertl, Brian, that might be the big whiff from what you just said, but we'll dig in. We've already talked about him so much over the playoffs. So let's close things out. Let's do a couple league updates before we end the show. We had our Keeping Karlsson patron playoff pool. And Brian, guess what? I'm not going to win. I'm in second place, unfortunately. I picked a bunch of Bruins, but Jaja's team called Elon is a Hoser. They're running away with it. They're going to win. So Jaja, I'm going to be sending you these random hockey books from my mom's house. I posted in the patron Facebook group the books. I guess I'll send you one of them. We'll discuss once you've got the win officially. We'll discuss how I can get you that book. Then we also had a couple winners playoff pool, and frickin' Dave Betton, the guy who won the whole thing and is the couple ultimate champion, tier 1 champ, also is destroying the couple winners playoff pool. We did it in a way where in round 2, Jordan won, but then we redrafted for the final 2 rounds, and Dave drafted like all Bruins and Blues, and so he's like ruling the day. Everyone else is long gone. Then Brian, one other pool I wanted to bring up. Brian, remember on the Patron cast when we did a draft of playoff teams? We did an auction draft where we each drafted playoff teams, and then whoever ended up with the winning team was going to win. Remember that?
Yes.
Yeah, I guess you're a little
vividly.
Yeah, because you bid 19 of your $30 budget to get the Tampa Bay Lightning, who were out oh so fast. Currently, I am still in it because I have the Boston Bruins, who I spent $5 of my budget on, and Dave is still in it because he has the St. Louis Blues, who he spent $4 of his budget on. So who would have predicted it? But it's between me and Dave. So Dave Betton might pull off a three-peat. He might get the trio of pool wins of the couple, the
trifecta.
The trifecta, that's what I should say. But right now, the Bruins are looking pretty good. So I'm feeling good about that one. There's also a pool that patron Ben set up, a Survivor-style playoff pool, and Jade and Victor are neck and neck right now. So I just wanted to give them a shout out. But okay, Brian, with that, I guess let's end the show. So what are all the takeaways here? You could follow us on Twitter at Keeping Karlsson. These are the main, all the projection stuff, whatever. That's boring. This is the important stuff. Follow us on Twitter at Keeping Karlsson. If you want to pre-order the Almanac, keepingkarlsson.com/almanac. If you want to become a patron, keepingkarlsson.com/patron. You got a lot of fun perks there. You could go to the website, check them out. And if you just give us any amount of money, we'll give you access to all of our perks. So we'd love to have you on board. But if you want to wait till the season starts, I don't really care. Like, whatever. We'd love to have you. When the season starts, being a patron is really, really fun. For now, it's pretty fun, I would say. And we're actually going to be doing a patron cast probably next weekend. So we'll be posting soon, asking for the patrons questions, and we'll answer every single one of them. That's what we do every single month for the patrons. But with that, Brian, let's cue the outro music. And why don't you go ahead and read us the credits?
All right. This episode of the Keeping Karlsson podcast was presented by Dobber Hockey and powered by our patrons, including our newest ones, Corey W., Maddie B., Matthew C., and John N. Thanks for joining us for the off season. This episode was researched with help from Dobber Hockey, Frozen Pool, Dobber Prospects, Natural Stat Trick, Evolving Hockey, Cap Friendly, Charting Hockey, Hockey Reference, Hockey Viz, Hockey Database, Elite Prospects, Roto World, and Yahoo. Actually, not Yahoo. Not this week.
Okay, well, whatever. I'm sure you didn't use all of them this week.
I did. I always keep it very faithful. I'm very faithful.
All right, I think I might have looked at
in
Yahoo.
Corsica. It's not in there.
Okay, so do you want to do it again?
No.
Okay. Man, so hard on Yahoo. Just don't say it. It's like worse that you say them and then be like, actually, no, not Yahoo. Okay, whatever. But anyway, thanks a lot for that, Brian, and thanks for all this research and to all the new members of the 75 Plus Point Club. Looking forward to doing another episode with you in a couple of weeks. I guess our next episode will be like our last kind of boring episode where not much has happened, and then the following one, we're already going to be at the draft and like free agency and trades, and it's going to start getting really crazy.
Yeah, can't wait. But until then, why don't you just keep on keeping Karlsson?
Okay. Good job. Cool. We made it.
Good job.
It's even a shorter episode than usual.
Great.
Okay, so I guess we'll chat soon.
Yeah.
I'll do the edit, you'll do the write-up. And Paul's your dad. Wait, Jim's your dad. What's that saying?
Bob's your uncle.
Bob's your uncle.
Paul's your dad.
Paul's your dad. My boss's name, Paul. Maybe that should be it. Paul's your boss. Nina also has a boss named Paul, but he's retiring, so now she's gonna have a new boss. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.
Yeah. Thanks to people in the chat room, Ben.
Oh yeah, thanks Prince and Ben and
Alex. Yeah, killing it in here.
You all rock.
You rock. Oh, what's the score on the Raptors? I'll check offline. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.